A child was born into a world where love did not exist, and no one would ever speak his name with kindness. This is the story of Savage Opress, the weapon of Dathomir, the brother of Wrath, the Sith who was never meant to be. Before he bled for the dark side, before he carved his way across the galaxy beside a fallen ghost, Savage Opress was just a child, and his world taught him one truth: survival is pain. Dathomir was not like other planets. It breathed death, it birthed violence. The force that lived there was not calm or balanced, it was hungry. And in the dark, the matriarchs of that world knew how to feed it. The Nightsisters were rulers in all but name, a clan of dark witches bound to ancient magics, trained in alchemy, illusion, and manipulation. They were not Jedi. They were not Sith. They were something older, something colder. Beneath them lived the Night Brothers, tribal men bred for strength, obedience, and ritual combat. They did not choose their lives. They were tools, meant for labor, meant for blood. And among them, a boy named Savage was born. He was strong even as an infant, taller than the others, quieter than most. But in the Night Brother village, strength was not a gift, it was a curse. The strongest were always the first to die, chosen for trials, chosen for pain. No one celebrated his birth. There were no lullabies in the jungle, only screams, distant, sharp, and short-lived. Dathomir did not reward hope, it punished it. Savage grew quickly. By the age of 5, he had seen more death than most soldiers do in war. Brothers dragged into the forest, bones left behind, marks carved into their skin so the witches would remember which ones obeyed, which ones resisted. He learned early how to keep his head down, how not to speak unless spoken to, how to fight when told and stop when ordered. Emotion was dangerous, attachment was forbidden, mercy was punishable by death. And so, he buried everything. No memories of his mother, no dreams of escape, just a cold acceptance that his body was not his own, that his life belonged to the ones who watched from the cliffs, the Nightsisters cloaked in mist and power. But even among the Night Brothers, there were whispers, stories passed in grunts and half-words, that the witches were watching, that they were preparing something, that some of the children, the strongest ones, were not born to die in the jungle, but to be remade into something worse. Savage didn't believe it, or maybe he just didn't allow himself to. Still, he felt it, a quiet pull, a hunger in the air that only seemed to grow with time. He watched as others were taken not for training, not for punishment, but for something else, something that left them changed, or never brought them back at all. He remembered one boy, Katuunko, who smiled too often, who dreamed out loud. One night, the witches came. They called his name. He did not return. Savage never smiled again. The elders told them it was destiny, that the strong must serve the dark, that the blood of the ancient Zabrak line flowed for the will of the sisters. But Savage didn't care about bloodlines. He cared about the silence that came after each disappearance, the emptiness it left behind. As he grew, so did his fear. But fear became discipline. Pain became armor. And in the place where childhood should have been, there was only waiting. Waiting for the call. Waiting for the shadows to reach down and choose him next. He was never meant to be anything. Not a warrior, not a leader, not even a man. He was raised to follow, to fight when commanded, to fall when required, to be forgotten. His name was Savage, but he hadn't earned it. It was given like a mark, not a title. He didn't speak often. Night Brothers weren't allowed many words, and the ones who did speak were the first to vanish. So he watched, he listened, he obeyed, The trials began early. Combat circles, bone weapons, blindfolds, heat, hunger. There were no teachers, only elders with scars, who struck without warning. They taught through pain and expected silence in return. Savage didn't cry, not when his leg broke in the jungle, not when his hand was crushed during sparring, not when his closest friend was taken by the witches and never came back. Pain wasn't something to feel, it was something to carry. The older brothers mocked him, called him slow, too quiet, too careful. But the elders saw something else. Not brilliance, not defiance, control. Savage was learning to endure, and on Dathomir that was rare. The strongest Night Brothers were often the loudest, but they were always the first to die. The jungle didn't care how brave you were. It only listened to those who survived. By the time he was 12, Savage had passed the Iron Circle, a brutal melee where 10 boys entered, and only one walked out conscious. He didn't kill them. He just fought until they couldn't stand. That was the first time the witches looked at him. He felt it. Cold eyes watching from the cliffs, shadows that didn't move with the wind. Mother Talzin didn't speak to the Night Brothers. She didn't have to. Her will moved through silence. Savage could feel her power, like gravity pulling at his bones. She didn't see him as a child. She saw potential, something to mold, something to bend. He tried not to be noticed after that. He trained harder, worked longer, ate less, spoke nothing. But no matter how far he ran from it, the dark kept reaching for him. The other brothers whispered about him now. He's being marked. He's next. Don't get close. Even his own kin kept their distance. He was becoming something else. Not better, not stronger, just different. He didn't understand why. He had never asked for it. He never wanted to be chosen. All he wanted was peace. But Dathomir didn't offer peace. It offered purpose. And Savage Opress was being shaped into a purpose he didn't choose. His body grew faster than the others. He towered over them. Every scar on his skin told a different story. Every glance from the elders carried weight. They knew his time was coming, and he knew it too. At night, he dreamed of fire, of being dragged from the jungle, of faces he didn't recognize, of his own voice, screaming in a language he had never spoken. He would wake with clenched fists, jaw locked, breath shallow. But no one asked. No one ever asked. Night Brothers didn't dream. Night Brothers didn't fear. And Savage had already learned how to bury every part of himself. One day, it would cost him everything. But for now, he stayed quiet and waited for the world to break him open. They came at night. They didn't speak. They didn't explain. They simply pointed, and Savage obeyed. 2 Nightsisters stood at the edge of the camp, faces covered, hands glowing faint green. No one else moved. No one else dared. The elders lowered their eyes. The brothers turned their backs. Savage stood alone. He didn't ask why. He already knew. He was the strongest. That's all they needed. He followed them through the jungle, past roots shaped like bones, past rivers that whispered in the dark. They didn't look at him. They didn't slow down. He was not a guest. He was a subject. The path twisted upward. Stone steps, old carvings, symbols of pain older than history. And then, the mist opened. The fortress of the Nightsisters stood above the jungle, silent, breathless, alive. Inside, he saw her. Mother Talzin. She did not rise. She did not speak. She simply stared, and Savage felt something inside him curl. Not fear, not awe, something colder, recognition, like he had always belonged to her, like his whole life had been preparing for this moment. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. She raised one hand, the others stepped back. He was surrounded by candles now, by smoke, by voices in tongues he didn't know, and the ritual began. Green mist coiled around his arms. His skin burned. His heart raced. They spoke of power, of destiny, of a new weapon. They did not speak of him, only what he would become. He screamed, not from pain, but from loss. Something inside him slipped away. Memories, feelings, names. His body grew. Muscles tore and reformed. Bones twisted. Flesh expanded. He was being reborn. Not as a man, but as a monster. And through it all, Mother Talzin smiled. When it was over, Savage collapsed. He couldn't feel his hands, couldn't feel his face. Only the weight of something new inside him. Something violent. He looked at his reflection, water pooled beneath the altar. This wasn't his face. It was larger, sharper, meaner. His eyes had changed. He had changed, but not by choice. He didn't understand why. He didn't understand what he had become. The Nightsisters told him it was power, that he would serve them, that he would destroy their enemies, that he was lucky. He didn't feel lucky. He felt hollow, like something important had been taken, and nothing had replaced it. They gave him new armor, taught him new words, stripped away his name, and gave it back twisted. Savage. It no longer sounded like a name. It sounded like a weapon. And that's what he was now. A blade to be thrown. A hammer to break others. He was no longer a night brother. No longer a child. No longer his own. His hands were not his. His voice belonged to others. His soul had been sealed in silence. And somewhere beneath the surface, he felt it scream. But no one heard, because the transformation was complete. Savage Opress had been taken by the shadows, and he would never be the same. He rose slowly, not because he was weak, but because his body no longer felt like his own. Every breath was heavier, every movement sharper, every heartbeat louder. The Nightsisters watched him in silence. They saw strength. They saw obedience. They saw a weapon. But Savage felt something else. Emptiness. He tried to speak. Only a low growl came out. Rough. Unfamiliar. The ritual had changed him. Not just his flesh. Not just his power. It had taken pieces of him he could never recover. He stepped forward. The stone beneath his feet cracked. He didn't understand how strong he'd become, or how fragile his old self now felt. A sister approached him, placed a hand on his arm. Her voice was soft but cold. "You belong to us now." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They weren't asking. They were reminding. They led him out of the chamber, down narrow halls, past doors sealed with runes, past echoes of old cries trapped in the stone. These walls remembered every weapon they had ever created. And now, they would remember him too. Outside, the night air hit his skin like ice. He looked toward the jungle, the place he had once called home. It felt farther than ever. The Night Brothers saw him return, but they did not greet him. They did not speak. Some bowed their heads. Some stepped away. They didn't see Savage. They saw what the witches had made him. A reminder that any one of them could be taken next, broken next, rebuilt next. He walked through the village as if it were unfamiliar ground. Tents he had slept in, fires he had sat beside, faces he had known for years. All of it felt distant, stripped of meaning. The brothers whispered behind him, "That's not him. He changed. Stay away." He didn't blame them. He wasn't sure who he was anymore. His body ached. Not from injury, from power trying to settle inside him. From instincts not his own pulling at his thoughts, twisting his emotions. He felt stronger, but also less human. He touched his chest, felt his heartbeat. Hard, steady, unnatural. He wondered if the old Savage still lived, somewhere deep inside, buried beneath layers of Nightsister alchemy, drowning beneath a will that wasn't his. He tried to remember his mother's voice. He couldn't. He tried to remember his first hunt. Nothing. He tried to remember who he was before the ritual. The memory broke apart like dust. The witches hadn't just given him power. They had taken something in return. Choice, identity, peace. He knelt beside the fire pit, the same one his brothers used to gather around. He reached toward the flames, stopped. His hand trembled, not in fear, but in conflict. There was something deep inside him, still resisting. A quiet heartbeat of the boy he once was. A small voice trying to survive beneath the monster they had crafted. He clenched his fist. Silence fell over the camp. The brothers watched him, not with respect, but with caution. They didn't know what he would do. He didn't know either. All he knew was that something inside him was fading. Not dying, not gone, just trapped. The witches summoned him again before dawn. Their command was simple. He would serve now. He would be sent away, given to new masters, used in new wars. His life no longer belonged to Dathomir or to himself. And Savage Opress, once a quiet boy with quiet dreams, walked into the mist without looking back, because there was nothing left behind him, and nothing ahead of him, except obedience. She had been left to die, cut down by the man she served, buried beneath betrayal, alone. Asajj Ventress didn't return to Dathomir for healing. She returned for revenge. The jungle welcomed her like a wound reopened. Every vine remembered her pain. Every whisper in the mist carried her fury. She did not come to beg. She came to strike back. Mother Talzin waited at the heart of the dark, not surprised, not concerned. She had seen this coming. Ventress knelt before her, not out of respect but necessity. She needed power. She needed a weapon. Talzin offered both, for a price. They would not fight Dooku with armies. They would break him from within. They would poison the master with his own tool. A new assassin, strong, loyal, controlled. A night brother. Ventress smiled. She remembered their strength, their silence, their pain. They were easy to mold. And so the hunt began. Ventress walked among them like a shadow, tall, unyielding. Her presence made them kneel. The Night Brothers did not ask why. They knew, when the witches came, someone always vanished, chosen, twisted, forgotten. Savage stood among them, larger than before, quieter than ever. He had survived their ritual once, but now the witches had returned, and they weren't finished with him. Ventress watched him fight, brutal, efficient, but what caught her eye was his restraint. He held back, not out of weakness, but control. She saw something useful, a blade not yet unsheathed. She chose him. Savage was pulled aside. The others watched in silence. Some looked away. He didn't resist. He never did. That night, the witches gathered again. The green mist rose once more, but this time, it wasn't just to change him. It was to break him. Ventress didn't speak. She simply stood and watched as the process began. They poured magic into his bones. They tore his body open from the inside. Every scream was swallowed by the jungle. He grew larger, stronger, faster, but the more they gave him, the less of him remained. The boy who once feared the fire was gone. In his place stood something else, something colder, something without questions. Ventress approached, looked into his yellow eyes, tested his obedience. Kill him. She pointed to one of his brothers, the one who had once trained beside him, eaten with him, slept beside him. Savage didn't speak, didn't hesitate. He obeyed. The strike was fast, cleaner, final. Ventress watched carefully. Not the kill, but the silence after. Savage didn't cry, didn't flinch. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, waiting for the next command. The witches had done their part. The ritual was complete. The weapon was ready. Mother Talzin stepped forward. This one is yours now. Ventress nodded, but deep down, she knew something had shifted. The Nightsisters were not loyal. They never gave without taking. This wasn't just a pawn. This was a fuse, one spark, and he might burn everything. Still, she took him. She would use him. Because revenge doesn't wait. He did not know what he was becoming, only that it hurt. His skin burned beneath the surface. His blood felt heavier. His breath came in bursts. The witches circled him. Their chants echoed like thunder inside his skull. Every word carved deeper into who he was. Savage Opress stood in the center of their storm. Still, silent, obedient. But inside, something cracked. The ritual was not gentle. It was not sacred. It was not fair. It was transformation by force. Not to reveal something true, but to erase what had once been. The green mist swirled around his arms. It coiled through his spine. It wrapped around his heart and squeezed. He saw flashes, memories not his own, pain from other lives. Blood spilled in service of voices he never met. He tried to hold on to something real. His first brother, the night hunts, the stone fire pit. But the images faded, burned away. His name echoed from the cliffs, not as a comfort, but as a command. Savage, not a name, a weapon. The ritual pressed deeper. His muscles split and regrew. His horns stretched taller. His eyes changed color. Yellow, piercing, unblinking. The witches raised their hands. More, they whispered. He can take more. And they gave it, all of it, every ounce of Nightsister magic, every drop of Dathomir's hate. He collapsed. His knees struck stone. He couldn't scream. Not because of pride, but because his voice was no longer his. His heart raced, then slowed, then stopped. Just for a moment. In that silence, he heard nothing. No thoughts, no memory, no fear, only obedience. When it returned louder, harder, stronger. He rose, not like a man, like a beast. His hands clenched into fists without command. His jaw tightened, his spine straightened. He didn't recognize his own breath. Ventress stepped forward, studied him. Do you feel strong? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She smiled. The witches handed him a weapon. A heavy blade, rough, crude, but balanced in his hand like it belonged there. He swung once. It shattered stone. Ventress gave the order. Prove it. Another Night Brother was brought forward. Unarmed. Nervous. Savage didn't look at him. He struck. Fast. Efficient. No hesitation. The body hit the ground. Still twitching. Then silent. Ventress said nothing. The witches said nothing. Savage stood over the corpse, breathing slow, waiting for the next one. There was no remorse, no confusion, but deep within him, buried under layers of power and ritual, a flicker trembled. He had known that face, but the ritual had taken the name. Mother Talzin stepped closer. Her voice cut through the air like smoke. "You are ready." Savage nodded, not because he understood, but because he had been made to. They dressed him in armor, red, black, unforgiving. They painted his skin, not for beauty, for ownership. Each mark a symbol, each symbol a chain. He was complete. Ventress placed her hand on his shoulder. "You belong to me now." He did not flinch. She smiled again, but only with her mouth. The witches faded into the mist. Their work was done. Savage Opress had been remade, not as a man, not as a brother, not even as a Sith, but as something in between, a monster, created for someone else's war. Count Dooku didn't ask where he came from. He only asked if he could kill. Savage Opress stood before him, towering, armored, silent, his eyes locked forward, his fists clenched without effort, his breath controlled. Dooku circled him slowly, a predator studying its own creation. Ventress stood in the corner, quiet, waiting. She hadn't told Dooku the truth. Not about the Nightsisters, not about the ritual, not about the control she still held. Dooku believed the Zabrak was a gift, a replacement, a tool, one that would answer only to him. He gave the first order, "Kill the guards." Savage obeyed. No words, no questions. He moved like fire, blades drawn, bodies broken, necks crushed. He didn't roar. He didn't hesitate. It was over in seconds. Dooku nodded, satisfied. "Yes, he will do." Ventress smiled behind her eyes. It had begun. Savage was given a ship, armor forged in secrecy, missions without purpose, targets without names. Dooku sent him across the stars. Ambushes, executions, threats. Each task darker than the last. Each one a test. Savage completed them all. But each time he returned, he looked less alive. Dooku noticed. He didn't care. The Zabrak didn't need clarity. He needed discipline. And Dooku had no shortage of cruelty. Training began. Force manipulation, lightsaber drills, mental control. Dooku struck without warning, choked without cause, punished every pause. Savage learned quickly, not because he wanted to, because the pain gave him no other choice. He was not treated like an apprentice. He was not spoken to like a sentient being. He was an animal, chained, sharpened, unleashed. And deep inside, something growled back. Ventress watched carefully. Her timing had to be perfect. Too soon, Dooku would crush her plan. Too late, Savage might forget who he truly served. So she waited, until the day came. Dooku summoned Savage. Another mission, another meaningless target. But Ventress arrived first. In the dark of the hangar bay, she whispered to him, "Tonight we strike." Savage blinked, not confused, but torn. The voices in his head pulled in opposite directions. Dooku, Ventress, Obedience. Rage. He followed her anyway. They entered Dooku's chambers as one. Lightsabers drawn. Silent, the Count was not surprised. He welcomed it. The duel ignited. Ventress struck from the shadows. Savage charged from the front. But Dooku was stronger than both. He moved with elegance, precision. Lightning arced from his fingers. Blades spun like wind. Savage fought harder, but something cracked. He was not a partner, not an equal. He was a puppet. Ventress shouted commands. Dooku barked orders. Neither cared who he was, only what he could do. He struck wildly, angrily. Ventress was thrown back. Dooku advanced, and Savage made a choice, not between masters, between survival and slavery. He turned, attacked them both. Ventress screamed. Dooku cursed. He didn't care. He broke the chamber wall, crushed a support beam, and fled, alone. The halls burned behind him. Alarms blared. Droids followed. He didn't stop. He tore through metal, smashed through blast doors, escaped into space. He didn't know where to go, only that he couldn't return. Not to Dooku, not to Ventress, not to anyone. He was no longer theirs, but he was not his own either. The stars didn't welcome him. They drifted past his stolen ship like they didn't care, like they had seen monsters before. Savage sat in silence. No voices, no commands, no mission, just quiet. He didn't understand what he was feeling. Was it freedom? Or was it emptiness? He had no master, no home, no name that felt real anymore. He remembered Dooku's voice, sharp, cold. He remembered Ventress's smile, false, poisoned. They had used him, changed him, abandoned him. And now, there was nothing left to serve. So he turned to what was left. Anger. He dropped out of hyperspace near a trading post. Small, remote, forgettable. The kind of place no one asked questions. He landed without clearance. Walked through the market like a ghost in armor. The people stared. Some backed away. He ignored them, until one man reached for his weapon. Savage didn't wait. He lifted the man with one hand, crushed his spine, dropped the body. The others ran, but Savage didn't chase them. He wasn't hunting. He wasn't warning. He was just lost. The silence followed him wherever he went. Not peace, not calm, just the absence of purpose. He wandered from system to system, wrecked outposts, destroyed ships, left trails of bodies no one claimed. He was searching, but he didn't know for what. Some nights, he heard voices. Not Dooku, not Ventress. Something older, something buried. He would wake with his hands trembling, breathing hard, sweat soaking his armor. He saw flashes, not memories, visions, a shape in the dark, horns, eyes like fire, a voice that didn't speak with words, but with pain. He didn't know who it was, but it felt familiar, and that scared him more than anything. He landed on a desolate moon once. No cities, no people, just rocks and wind. He stood on a cliff and screamed. The sound vanished into the void. He didn't know who he was anymore. A killer, a tool, a mistake. He didn't know where to go, until he remembered something. Not a face, not a name, a feeling, a bond, blood. There was someone else, another like him, changed, broken, left behind. He didn't know if the memory was real, didn't know if the image in his mind was truth. or something the witches had planted long ago. But it was all he had, so he followed it. Across dead worlds, through ruins, through silence, he hunted whispers, traced old reports, scanned forgotten transmissions. Each clue felt colder, but closer. He was being pulled by something deeper than the Force, by something that had been waiting, not for revenge, not for power, for reunion. Savage Opress wasn't looking for purpose anymore. He was looking for family. He was brought back in chains, not because he resisted, but because it pleased them. Count Dooku stood in silence, watching the Zabrak kneel, observing the bruises, measuring the damage. Savage didn't speak. He had learned what silence cost, and what it sometimes protected. Ventress stood beside Dooku, calm, controlled, smiling behind her mask. She didn't look at Savage, not directly. She didn't need to. Her plan had already begun. Dooku circled the prisoner. He spoke of loyalty, of strength, of obedience. He spoke as if the words mattered, as if Savage hadn't heard them all before, as if promises had meaning here. But this wasn't a lesson. It was a performance, a show of dominance. For Ventress, for himself, he unlocked the chains. You'll serve me now, without question, without hesitation. Savage nodded once, not because he agreed, but because he understood what came next. The Sith did not reward choice. They punished it. Dooku began his training, not with wisdom, but with pain. Every failure was met with lightning, every pause with rage. They sparred daily, not for skill, for control. Savage was pushed to the edge, then beyond it. He learned to fight through wounds, to ignore commands that made no sense, to act without thought, only reaction. He didn't grow stronger. He grew harder. The pain dulled. The thoughts faded. He became exactly what they wanted, until the moment passed, and they wanted something else. Dooku sent him on missions, quick strikes, silent kills. He returned without complaint. He never asked who they were, or why they needed to die. He didn't need to know. It wasn't part of the job. Ventress oversaw his tactics. She watched him spar, corrected his form, praised his brutality. But her eyes always watched more than she said. Savage felt it, the tension beneath her words. He couldn't name it, but it followed him everywhere. Sometimes, at night, he felt her presence, outside his chamber, beyond the door, not as a friend, not as a master, as something else, waiting. He didn't speak of it, didn't question it. He had no one to ask, no one to trust. Dooku's guards treated him like a weapon, not a person. The droids didn't speak, only obeyed. He spent most days in the training hall, alone, practicing movements that no longer felt his. The blade no longer felt heavy. It felt like an extension, like his own hand, and his hand no longer trembled. There was power in him now, but it didn't belong to him. It was borrowed, leased, tied to commands he didn't give himself. Each day, Dooku tightened his grip. Each night, Ventress whispered in shadows, and Savage stood between them, unmoving, unwanted, used, but something deep inside him watched, a part of him they hadn't reached yet. A memory, a name, a fire, not enough to change anything, but enough to remember that chains may hold the body, but they cannot silence the scream forever. He became a shadow, sent where others refused to go, ordered to kill those too dangerous to keep alive, or too inconvenient to let speak. Savage moved through war zones like a silent storm. No banners, no questions, no mercy. Dooku gave the targets. Ventress whispered the methods, and Savage obeyed. His first mission was a separatist purge, a governor who doubted the Count, a man who begged for peace. Savage crushed him with a single strike, not out of anger, out of duty. The next mission was worse, a Jedi outpost on Ord Vandal, a small group, a quiet place. Savage landed without warning, walked through the gates, ignored every plea. Blades lit the night sky. The Jedi fought with calm. Savage fought with instinct. He broke their guard, shattered their defenses, cut through their ranks. The last one fell silently, a Padawan, barely older than a child. Savage stood over the body, breathing hard. Something inside him trembled, something faint, something buried. Then Dooku's voice came through the comlink. Good, move on. And the feeling died. He left the bodies where they fell, didn't look back. He never did. More missions followed, more blood, more silence. He killed pirates, traitors, senators who knew too much, mercenaries who threatened the Count's plans. Each life ended the same way, quick, final, forgotten. Savage didn't mourn them. He didn't celebrate either. He didn't feel anything. Ventress watched from a distance. She saw how he moved, how he listened, how he killed without hesitation. She saw the cracks forming too. Sometimes, after a mission, Savage stayed still for hours, not resting, not thinking, just sitting, as if waiting for a memory to return, or a voice to rise from the silence. Ventress approached him once, tried to speak to him. You're stronger than he knows. Savage didn't answer. He wasn't sure if she was comforting him or preparing him. The missions continued. He fought in factories where the air burned the lungs, in forests where the fog hid snipers, on ships drifting through space with no power. He survived them all, not because he was careful, but because he no longer cared if he lived or died. On Raxus Prime, he faced another Jedi, a master this time, older, wiser. The duel was long, measured, controlled. Savage fought with brute strength, the Jedi with patience. For a moment, Savage faltered. The Jedi reached for him through the Force. There is still good in you. Savage hesitated, then struck. The Jedi fell, eyes filled with quiet sadness, not fear. Savage turned away. Something inside him twisted, pain or regret. He couldn't tell. He reported back to Dooku. The Count praised him. Ventress smiled behind him, but Savage didn't feel stronger. He felt heavier. Each mission added a new scar, not on his skin. Inside, a part of him was breaking, a part that still remembered home, a part that still remembered being a brother, a son, a person. Now he was none of those things. He was a blade without purpose, a weapon without will, a monster shaped by hands that never cared who he had been. But the galaxy whispered another truth. A weapon like Savage Opress would eventually turn on the hand that held it. He stood between them, and he belonged to neither. Dooku ruled with silence, with lightning, with threat. Ventress led with softness, with smiles, with lies. Both pulled at him. Both claimed control, but neither offered truth. Savage obeyed because he was made to, not because he believed. Not anymore. Dooku's training was never about the Force, never about understanding. It was punishment. Each lesson came with pain, each mistake with humiliation, force lightning in the spine, chokes that lasted too long, duels that began without warning and never ended in victory. He was meant to feel small, to feel owned, and for a while, he did, but not forever. Ventress came to him in quiet moments, after missions, after blood, after screams had faded. "You are more than this," she whispered. "You were chosen for greater things." He listened, but he didn't trust her. She had smiled before. When she brought him to Dooku, when she watched him change, she had used him too. Now she offered comfort, but it felt like another chain. He didn't know who to hate more, her voice or his own silence. They began to argue more, not with words, with power. Dooku tested him harder, more dangerous missions, more impossible odds. Savage completed them, but each time, he returned colder. Ventress noticed it. So did Dooku. He became less obedient, more unpredictable. Dooku pushed harder. Ventress whispered louder. They were waiting for him to break. Neither expected what came instead. He began to watch them, not with fear, with clarity. He saw how Dooku moved, how every gesture demanded submission. He saw how Ventress flattered, how every touch was calculated. He was not part of a plan. He was the plan. A pawn caught between two Sith, used in a war that was never his. His hands had killed so many, but none of it had been for him. No purpose, no honor, only orders. And something inside him began to burn. Not rage, not revenge, awareness. They feared each other more than they feared him, and that was their mistake. They believed Savage Opress was only what they made him, but they had never looked past his strength, never listened to his silence. He wasn't confused anymore. He wasn't loyal. He was waiting for the moment both masters forgot he could think, could choose, could act. That moment was coming. Ventress approached him one night, tried again. "Soon, we strike together. We take the power for ourselves." Savage looked at her. She saw something in his eyes. Not agreement, not rebellion, something worse. Distance, the same look he gave the dead. She didn't speak again. He left without a word, back to training, back to drills, back to pretending. But inside, he had already made his decision. The next time someone pulled his leash, he would pull back, harder, and when he did, there would be no mercy. Because the truth was simple. He was not a servant. He was not a brother. He was not a Sith. He was pain, and pain, once awakened, cannot be chained forever. The turning point didn't begin with anger. It began with silence, a moment so small it could have been ignored. A breath, a pause, the space between two heartbeats. Dooku called for him. Savage entered the chamber, calm, expressionless. Ventress stood behind the Count. Hands folded, eyes sharp. She was ready, so was Dooku. Two predators waiting for their moment. Savage stood between them again. But this time, he wasn't the prey. Dooku began the lesson. 4 strikes, precise, unrelenting. Savage absorbed each one. Not because he couldn't resist, but because he was listening. Ventress watched, her breathing steady, her posture tight. She was waiting for something. He didn't know what. Then she moved. Not fast, not loud, just a step, a shift in the weight of her heel. And Savage understood. It was happening now. Her betrayal, her revenge, her final strike. Dooku sensed it too. Lightning burst from his hand. Ventress leapt. Savage staggered. Not from damage, from confusion. They weren't fighting him. Not yet. They were fighting each other, and he was caught in the crossfire. Ventress shouted his name, her voice sharp, desperate. Kill him. Dooku's voice thundered back. Obey me. 2 orders. Both cold, both familiar. Savage didn't move. Not forward, not back. He looked at them. At the woman who had changed him. At the man who had broken him. At the 2 masters who had treated him like a tool. And something inside him finally snapped. Not with sound, with clarity. He lunged. Not toward Ventress. Not toward Dooku. Toward both. Ventress slashed. He blocked her. Shoved her aside. Dooku gathered power. Savage struck first. The Count staggered. Not injured, but shocked. No one had ever pushed him like that. Not someone beneath him. Not someone he created. Ventress attacked again. Savage parried. Her blade scorched his arm. He didn't feel it. He moved like a storm. No technique. No plan. Only instinct. Only truth. He wasn't fighting for her. He wasn't fighting for him. He was fighting for himself. Ventress called his name again, trying to control him, trying to steer the chaos. He ignored her. She had lost the right. Dooku roared commands, furious, threatening. Savage ignored him too. Lightning hit his chest. He stayed standing. Ventress leapt onto his back. He threw her into the wall. Dooku slashed with his saber. Savage caught his wrist, forced him back. They had underestimated him. He was not just muscle, not just rage. He was the consequence of their cruelty. The room shook with the force of his blows. Ventress retreated, eyes wide, breath unsteady. Dooku defended, barely. Savage didn't stop. He broke a pillar, collapsed half the chamber, crushed a line of droids rushing in. Ventress fled first. Dooku followed seconds later. Savage stood alone, breathing hard. The chamber burned around him, sparks falling like dying stars. Silence returning at last. He didn't chase them. He didn't need to. They were gone. The chains were gone with them. He looked at his hands, shaking, bleeding, alive. For the first time, he didn't feel like a servant, or a weapon, or a mistake. He felt free, not safe, not whole, but free. He walked into the night, alone, leaving the wreckage behind. Not because he feared what came next, because he no longer feared anything. The voices returned after the silence. They came in fragments, in dreams, in pain, not words, not commands, just feelings, rage, abandonment, a wound left open for too long. Savage didn't know where they came from, but he knew they were real. He heard them in sleep, felt them while awake, in battle, in flight, in the quiet between star systems. It was like something was reaching for him. Something angry, something broken, something familiar. He didn't understand it. Not at first, until he heard the name. Soft, barely formed. Maul. It echoed through him, rattled the bones beneath his armor, awakened something ancient in his blood. He didn't know who Maul was. Not yet. But the Force did, and it would not let him forget. He returned to Dathomir, not for refuge, not for forgiveness, for answers. The jungle didn't greet him. It tolerated him, just like before. The Nightsisters watched from the shadows, some with fear, some with curiosity, but none approached. Only one waited for him. Mother Talzin. She was older than memory, wiser than truth, and colder than the grave. She stood at the edge of the temple, hands folded, eyes closed. She already knew why he had come. "You've heard him," she said. Savage didn't nod, didn't speak. She smiled anyway. "The blood remembers," she whispered. "The bond cannot be broken." He stepped forward, his voice low. "Who is he?" Talzin opened her eyes. "Your brother." The air grew still. Savage didn't react, but inside, something shifted. A name, a connection, a truth he hadn't known he was missing. Talzin continued, "Taken from Dathomir long ago, trained by the Sith, discarded when broken." Savage narrowed his eyes. "I thought he died." She turned away, looked out across the jungle. Maul's story did not end in death. It ended in madness. Savage said nothing. He felt it now, clearly. Not just rage, not just suffering. A pull, like gravity, like blood calling to blood. He didn't ask why she hadn't told him sooner. He already knew. The witches never give everything, only what serves the moment. Talzin stepped closer. "He lives, alone, in exile." She placed a hand on his chest. "You must find him." Savage didn't flinch. "Where?" Talzin raised her other hand. Green mist curled from her fingers. A map formed in the air, flickering. Broken, he drifts through the void. In places the Jedi do not look. In places, the Sith have forgotten. She looked at him. "He needs you." Savage didn't understand that. No one had ever needed him, only used him. But something inside him believed her. He turned toward the mist, studied the stars, the trail that didn't yet make sense. Talzin's voice followed. He was cast aside, left to rot, but the Force cannot forget. Savage clenched his fists, not in anger, in resolve. "I'll find him." Talzin nodded, her voice softened. "He is more than you know, and so are you." Savage said nothing more. He returned to his ship, set the course. No farewell, no prayer, only purpose. The stars stretched before him, wide, empty, but he was not afraid, because, for the first time, he wasn't running from masters. He was running towards something older, something real, a brother, a name, Maul. The stars gave no answers, only silence. But silence could be followed, if you knew how to listen. Savage moved through forgotten systems, abandoned stations, ruined temples. Each world whispered part of the truth. Each scar in the stone told a story. He was searching for a ghost, but the ghost had left behind blood. The first trail led to Florum. A hut outpost burned from within. Blaster marks, slashed doors, bodies torn without elegance. The mercenaries there spoke in hushed tones. A demon, crawling, laughing, barely alive. Savage asked no questions. He simply listened, and moved on. The second trail brought him to Nar Shaddaa. A gang of slavers had vanished overnight. The few who escaped spoke of red lightning, of screams that didn't end, of a voice that spoke in riddles and rage. He wanted a ship, they said, but couldn't remember how to fly it. Savage stood over their leader. He was Zabrak. The man nodded, trembling. "Yes, but not like you." Savage's grip tightened. He didn't strike. Not this time. Because he understood. The one he searched for wasn't hiding. He was lost. Somewhere out there, his brother wandered, wounded, burning, alone. Savage left the slums without looking back. The Force was calling him again. Stronger. Now. More direct. Each system narrowed the path. Each whisper grew louder. He arrived at a mining station near the outer rim. Collapsed. Empty. But something remained. A trail of madness. Carved into the walls. Symbols. Words. Names long dead. He reached out with the Force. Closed his eyes. Pain met him like fire. Images. A hand dragging across metal. Eyes filled with hate. Claws scratching at memory. It was Maul. It had to be. He was leaving a message. Not for the galaxy. For someone who would understand. For him. Savage opened his eyes and moved again. The final trail was cold. Lotho Minor. A world that didn't exist on most maps. A dumping ground. A graveyard. Where broken machines and broken people vanished. The ship trembled as it entered orbit. The clouds below were thick, poisoned. Lightning danced across the surface. The wreckage of 1,000 dead civilizations. It was perfect. If the Sith wanted to bury something, this is where they would leave it. Savage landed near the edge of a canyon, climbed through the rot and ash. No signs of life, no voices, until he heard breathing. Not normal, not calm, panicked, heavy, animal. He moved slowly, carefully, past shattered droids, rusting walkers, creatures that didn't recognize fear. He fought them, silently, crushed them beneath his fists, burned them when needed. He didn't stop, because the presence was close now, so close it hurt. Each step burned his lungs. Each breath tasted of metal and filth. Then he found it. A cave, buried beneath ruin. And inside, a whisper, not of words, of hate, pure, cold, endless. Savage stepped into the dark, and the dark reached back. The darkness inside the cave felt alive. It clung to the walls. It crawled across the floor. It breathed with him. Savage moved deeper. One step, then another. The air grew thicker, colder, heavier. The presence was here, close enough to taste, close enough to hurt. Scratching echoed in the tunnel. Metal on metal, claws dragging across the stone. Savage raised his weapon. Not from fear, from certainty. Something was watching him. He followed the sound. Slow, silent. The cave twisted, narrowed, opened again, and then he saw it. A shadow in the corner, curled, shaking. Not a man, not a warrior. A creature, bony legs, bent spine, fur matted with filth. Scraps of metal fused to flesh. 2 horns, crooked, uneven. Savage froze. He knew those horns. The creature hissed, eyes glowing faint red. Unfocused, wild, it crawled along the ground, dragging itself on twisted limbs. Savage stepped forward. The creature darted back, snarling, guarding a pile of broken tools, a nest of trash and bone. It took him a moment to realize. This was Maul, the Sith Lord feared by Jedi, the assassin who once hunted Obi-Wan Kenobi, the warrior trained by Darth Sidious. Reduced to this, Savage lowered his weapon. "Brother!" The creature shrieked, leapt forward, struck him with metal claws. Savage didn't retaliate. He caught the attack, held Maul in place. Maul thrashed wildly, screamed, fought with a desperation born from years of torment. Savage tightened his grip, not to harm, to steady. "I came for you." Maul didn't understand, couldn't. His mind was fractured, split by pain. held together by rage alone. He lunged again. Savage pinned him to the ground. Maul writhed beneath him, a trapped animal, eyes filled with hatred. Savage didn't look away. "You are not alone." Maul's breathing slowed. Just a little, just enough for Savage to see past the madness. There was something there, buried deep, a spark, recognition, or memory, or instinct. Savage lifted him gently. Maul didn't resist. He was too weak, too broken. Savage carried him out of the cave, through the rust, through the wreckage. The sky above was red and sickly. The air burned with poison. Maul clung to him, not like a brother, like a dying creature desperate to live. Savage held him tighter. He reached the ship, set Maul inside. Maul curled instantly, shaking, muttering words that made no sense. Kenobi, cut, fell, hunger. Savage watched him. This was not a Sith Lord, not anymore. This was suffering made flesh. When the engines roared to life, Maul screamed. Savage placed a hand on his shoulder. "Firm, steady. You will live," he said. It wasn't a promise. It was a decision, for both of them. The ship rose from Lotho Minor, escaping the grave that had held Maul for so long. Savage didn't look back. He didn't need to. The nightmare was leaving the planet, sitting at his feet, breathing unevenly. And somewhere beneath the madness, Savage felt it again. The bond, the blood, the truth. He had found his brother, but saving him would cost far more. The ship touched down on Dathomir. The jungle greeted them in silence. Dark, still, waiting. Savage carried Maul down the ramp. The weight wasn't heavy, but it felt like it was. He wasn't carrying a brother. He was carrying what was left of one. Mother Talcin was already waiting. She stood beneath the twisted trees, her hands raised, her eyes closed. The Nightsisters formed a circle, chanting, moving slowly. Savage laid Maul down in the center. Maul twitched, snarled, spoke in pieces. "Kenobi, he cut me. In half, in half." Talcin stepped forward. She didn't flinch. "This body can be restored," she said. "But the mind." Her words trailed off. Savage said nothing. He didn't care what it cost. "Fix him." Talcin's hands moved. Green light flowed from her fingers. The mist surrounded Maul. He convulsed, screamed, fought. The magic pierced him, healed him, reshaped him. Metal legs formed where broken ones had been. Stronger, sharper, balanced. The scars faded, the bones aligned. His body was whole again, but his eyes stayed the same. Wild, lost, burning. Talcin stepped back. "It is done." Savage moved closer, knelt beside him. Maul. The name felt real now. Not just a whisper, not just a curse. Maul looked at him. For the first time, truly looked. Savage. The voice was low, rough, tired, but it remembered. Savage didn't smile. He never had. But something loosened in his chest. "You live." Maul nodded. "Barely. I never stopped." They sat together in the dust. No more words. The bond was stronger than anything spoken. They had both been used, both cast aside, both shaped into weapons for other people's wars. But now, they had each other. Savage helped him stand. Maul's legs held. He wobbled, then steadied. The fire returned to his eyes. Not madness. "Focus, Kenobi," he said again. Savage tilted his head. "Revenge?" Maul nodded. "They thought I died. But death was only the beginning." He looked out across the jungle. The galaxy forgot me. I will remind them. Savage didn't argue. He understood. Pain doesn't fade. It moves. It finds direction. And now, Maul had one. But Savage felt something deeper. Purpose, not given by a witch, not forced by a Sith, chosen. He would walk beside his brother, not behind, not beneath, together, not because the galaxy feared them, but because they were all each other had left. They returned to the ship. Savage glanced back once, at Dathomir, at the jungle, at the mist. He felt the past letting go. He didn't need it anymore. He had found what he was looking for. Not a master, not a cause, a name, a brother, a spark that had refused to die. The galaxy would feel it soon enough. He didn't heal like other men. There was no peace in recovery, no quiet in rest, only memory and rage. Savage watched over him, day after day, night after night, while Maul screamed in his sleep, while he tore at the walls, while he forgot his own name. Mother Talzin had rebuilt the body, but the mind, that was something else. Savage said little. He didn't know what to say. There was no comfort for men like them. Only time, and time was not kind. At first, Maul didn't speak in full words, only fragments, flashes of old pain. Kenobi, cut half. Master, gone. Savage waited. Every morning, he brought food. Every night, he dragged Maul back into the shadows, kept him from the edge, from falling again. Days passed, maybe weeks, then the voice changed, still rough, still damaged, but sharper now. He remembered, not everything, but enough. The battle, the fall, the rage. Maul sat beneath the trees, his metal legs twitching in silence. I was the future, he said. Savage stood beside him. The Sith threw you away. Maul looked up. They feared me. Savage nodded. They will again. And in that moment, something returned. Not all at once, not fully, but a piece of who he used to be. Maul stood, unsteady, but taller. He walked without growling, spoke without shaking. He trained again. At first, he could barely lift his saber. His strikes were slow, unfocused. Savage sparred him anyway. Every mistake, he let pass. Every wound, he ignored. Not out of pity, out of belief. He saw it building. Each day, Maul moved faster, hit harder, thought clearer. By the end of the first moon, he was breathing evenly. By the second, he was no longer talking to himself. He was making plans. The Jedi believe I'm dead, he said. They've forgotten fear. Savage remained silent, but his eyes said everything. Let them remember. They trained beneath Dathomir's sky. No audience, no commands, no masters, just brothers. One rebuilding, the other waiting to follow. There was trust there now, not spoken, but earned. Maul no longer saw Savage as a pawn, or a tool, or a failure. He saw blood. He saw loyalty. The first time Maul smiled, it wasn't pleasant. It was a promise. I'm not done, he whispered. Savage handed him a blade. Then let's begin. They didn't make an announcement. No grand speech, no flags, no symbols, only silence. Then violence. Their first strike was small. A Republic listening post. Remote, lightly guarded. 2 Jedi, 4 clones. No survivors. They moved fast, efficient, precise. Maul took the lead. Savage followed his rhythm. The two fought like one. Where Maul danced, Savage crushed. Where Savage cornered, Maul finished. It was not about honor, or war, or proving anything. It was a message. The Sith had failed them. The Jedi had ignored them. The galaxy had forgotten them. Now it would remember. They targeted isolated patrols, scattered detachments, systems no one watched closely. Maul chose the targets. Savage made sure they never escaped. Each mission was swift, brutal, untraceable. Ships were left drifting, bodies never found. Sometimes they took weapons. Sometimes they left nothing behind but ruin. Whispers began to spread. A red-skinned shadow. A second with golden armor. Two demons tearing through the void. Maul said little between strikes. He was always calculating, always thinking 2 steps ahead. Savage listened, watched. He saw how Maul studied holomaps, how he memorized routes, how he traced Jedi activity through patrol patterns. He was planning something bigger, but first, he needed to be feared again. They ambushed a Jedi near Sullust. Young, confident, alone, Maul didn't draw his saber at first. He spoke instead. "Do you remember me?" The Jedi hesitated. Recognition flickered. Doubt followed, then fear. Maul smiled and ended it. The Jedi didn't scream, only gasped. Savage watched quietly. He didn't feel pride. He didn't feel guilt. He felt purpose. For the first time, he wasn't killing because he was told to. He was choosing. And that choice was tied to his brother. They moved on. Another outpost. Another squad. Another step in the shadows. Maul began speaking more often now. Not just to Savage, to himself, to the Force. He spoke of Kenobi, of betrayal, of being cast aside. Savage didn't always understand, but he listened, because Maul needed someone to hear it. No one else ever had. They shared rations under broken stars, sharpened blades while enemy ships passed overhead. They didn't celebrate victories. They didn't count kills. They just kept moving, planet to planet, moon to moon. The Jedi started to notice. Old reports were reopened, old wounds too. The Council argued. He was dead. He couldn't be back. But the Force said otherwise, and the dead man was hunting again. Savage could see the change in Maul's eyes. He was no longer broken. He was building. Not just revenge, not just survival. Something larger. Savage didn't ask what. He didn't need to. He followed. Not because he was ordered to. Because Maul had earned it. Not with power, but with pain. And pain was something Savage understood. The whispers reached Coruscant, first through back channels, then through Jedi silence, then through fear. Maul had returned, not as a rumor, not as a ghost, as proof that the Sith's history never dies. It just waits to be remembered. He didn't hide anymore, not fully. He chose his targets carefully. Jedi outposts, supply lines, ambassadors with Republic ties, always far from reinforcements, always quick. The Jedi began to panic, not openly, but behind closed doors, because if Maul was back, it meant the Sith had failed to finish what they started. It meant the wound they thought healed was still bleeding. Maul fed on it. He wanted them afraid. He needed them afraid. He left survivors now, not out of mercy, out of strategy. One Jedi, he crippled, let him crawl, told him to deliver a message. I lived, and I remember. The survivor didn't speak for days, When he finally did, he repeated the words like a prayer. Maul is alive. Savage said little, but he watched Maul carefully. He was changing, sharper, colder, focused, but not mad, not anymore. The madness had become something else. Clarity. He wasn't just killing to be seen. He was building towards something. Each attack tested their reach. Each escape tested their patience. They were drawing attention now, not just from Jedi, from bounty hunters, from planetary defense fleets, from Sith eyes. And Maul welcomed it, because it meant the galaxy was watching again. They landed on a mid-rim moon, uncharted, overgrown. A Republic scout team had set up there, monitoring hyperspace lanes. Maul walked into the camp without his hood. The soldiers froze, stared. One of them whispered, "It's him." Maul raised his saber and confirmed it. Savage struck from the side. Fast, clean. They moved like water. No words, no mistakes. When it was done, only one soldier was left. He didn't run, didn't speak, just stared at Maul. "You died," he said. Maul stepped closer. "I was supposed to." He left him breathing. 2 days later, the image appeared in encrypted Jedi records. Grainy, shaky, but clear. 2 Zabraks, one red, one gold, walking into shadow. One name was written in the margins. The Phantom Menace. Maul smiled when he saw it. "I never wanted titles," he said. Savage nodded. "But they help." The galaxy was remembering. Not who he was, but what he meant. He was the Sith's greatest failure. And now, he was becoming their greatest fear. Savage watched it all unfold. The way Maul moved, the way he spoke. He wasn't rebuilding the past. He was shaping something new. Not Jedi, not Sith, something in between. Something worse. Savage didn't know what it was yet. But he knew this. He would follow. Because Maul wasn't just a phantom anymore. He was real. And he was rising. They moved like a storm without a center. No master guiding them. No order restraining them. No cause but their own. And the galaxy felt it. Maul no longer hid his purpose. He sharpened it. Spoke it aloud. Carved it into every battlefield they left behind. "This time," he said, "I choose the war." Savage understood. He had lived under commands his entire life. Obeyed witches, served Sith, followed orders carved in cruelty. But now, for the first time, he stood beside someone who wasn't trying to shape him. Maul didn't command, he expected, and Savage met every expectation without hesitation. They struck a Trade Federation convoy near the Rishi Maze. No Jedi, only guards. The attack lasted minutes. Maul tore through the command deck. Savage ripped open the hull. Cargo drifted into space, bodies with it. Maul watched them fall into the void. Expression calm. "They will talk," he said. Savage nodded. "They already are." The next strike hit a Republic sensor station. Hidden, secret, but secrets didn't matter anymore. Not to Maul. He walked through the holes like a shadow, saber spinning in slow, controlled arcs. Savage followed behind, clearing rooms, breaking walls, turning the base into dust. When it ended, Maul stood over the wreckage. "No one controls us now," he said. Savage looked at him, not as a servant, not as a student, as a brother. "What comes next?" Maul's answer was simple: chaos. And he meant it. They traveled through systems with no names, fought warlords, killed pirates who tried to take their ship, left entire syndicates in ruin. Savage noticed something new now. Maul wasn't chasing revenge. Not only, he was studying people, studying fear, studying power. He watched how leaders ruled, how armies moved, how planets bent under pressure. Savage realized what he was seeing. Ambition, heavy, growing, hunger shaped by pain. "You want more than Kenobi," Savage said once. Maul didn't deny it. Obsession is only the beginning. Control is the destination. Savage didn't challenge the idea, because, for the first time, he wasn't walking behind someone else's dream. He was walking into one he believed in. They met resistance, an elite Jedi squad. 3 knights, 1 master. They ambushed the brothers near a crashed cruiser, thought they had trapped them. They were wrong. The fight echoed through the valley. Blades clashing, stone breaking, dust rising. Savage crushed one Jedi against a cliff. Maul disarmed another with a swift spin. The master fought well, calm, steady, skilled, but Maul broke him, not with strength, with precision. When the duel ended, the Jedi lay dying, staring at Maul with fading clarity. "Why?" he asked. Maul leaned close. "Because I was denied my future. Now I will take yours." Savage watched the light fade, and felt no doubt. They were more than weapons now, more than survivors, more than broken men stitched together by fate. They were becoming something new, a force neither Jedi nor Sith had planned for, a threat without master, without leash, without fear. They left the valley behind them, walked into the rising wind. Maul stepped first. Savage followed, side by side. The storm grew with every world they touched. Not wild, not mindless, focused. And as they vanished into hyperspace, Savage, finally, understood the truth. They weren't rising for someone else's greatness. They weren't serving a legend or a doctrine. They were creating their own, together. A storm shaped by pain, driven by blood, free for the first time in their lives. And storms like that do not fade. They were alone now, not hunted, not chased, just forgotten. The Jedi wanted no part of them. The Sith had erased their names, and the galaxy had turned its back. But the brothers kept moving, not as fugitives, not as soldiers, as something else. Maul no longer spoke of Dooku, or Sidious, or Kenobi. He spoke of order, of control, of building something that could not be taken. Savage listened. He didn't understand all of it, but he felt the weight in Maul's voice, a hunger deeper than vengeance. And it frightened him, not because it was wrong, because it was familiar. He had seen this before, in Dooku, in Talzin, in every hand that ever tried to mold him. Maul was changing again, not breaking, becoming. He studied the galaxy from the shadows, mapped syndicates, analyzed systems, watched every weak link in the chain of power. "The Jedi hold the Republic," he said. "But they don't hold the underworld." Savage didn't answer. Maul didn't need permission. He made contact with the Pike Syndicate, the Black Sunday, even the Hutts. At first, they laughed. A Sith without an empire, a Zabrak with broken legs and no name. But Maul gave them something more powerful than fear. Opportunity. He offered control, secrecy, coordination. He didn't ask for loyalty, only silence. Within weeks, they were listening. Within months, they were obeying. Savage watched it happen, piece by piece. Step by step, his brother, the fallen apprentice, was becoming a leader. Not of a government, of something older, a network of shadows, a whisper beneath every crime, a hand behind every move. Savage stood beside him, helped enforce deals, threatened defectors, and those who resisted. But something in him stayed quiet. Not out of fear, out of doubt. He had followed Maul through pain, through blood, through purpose. But now, he wasn't sure where they were going. Maul spoke less during flights, spent more time in thought, always planning. And when he did speak, it wasn't about what they'd done. It was about what came next. "We need a symbol," he said. "Not fear, not destruction. A throne." Savage frowned. "What world would follow us?" Maul turned slowly. "They won't, but they'll kneel." And that's when Savage heard it for the first time. The name, Mandalore, a place of warriors, of chaos, of divided clans. A world with power, but no one to claim it. Maul didn't want to rule it. He wanted to use it. He reached out to Death Watch. Savage didn't trust them. Too proud, too desperate. But Maul didn't need trust. He needed leverage. He offered them something they couldn't refuse. Satine's fall, and their return. The deal was made. The trap was set. And for the first time, Savage realized something. They weren't rebels. They weren't outlaws. They were becoming rulers. But rulers of what? Maul stood at the edge of the ship, staring at Mandalore's surface below. Savage stepped beside him. "No one commands us now," he said. Maul's eyes narrowed. "Then let's see what happens. When we start commanding others." Mandalore did not welcome them. Its skies were gray, its cities cold, its people weary of war. But war was exactly what Maul brought. Death Watch met them on a barren plateau. Blue armor, jetpacks humming, eyes sharp with distrust. Savage stood at Maul's side, silent, watching. Pre Vizsla stepped forward, helmet under his arm, jaw tight. "You said you had a plan," he told Maul. "Not a story." Maul didn't flinch. "I offer you Mandalore." Vizsla laughed, short, bitter. "We don't need help." Maul turned slightly, eyes narrowing. "You need victory." There was no arrogance in his tone, only truth. Death Watch had numbers, weapons, tradition. But Mandalore had something stronger. A ruler who hated violence. A people tired of blood. A government built on ideals, not force. Satine had united them, but unity had made them soft. Savage felt the tension thicken. He knew how warriors like these thought. Pride was their armor, but failure was their wound. Maul struck at that wound. "You want control," he said. "You want Mandalore back, but you cannot take it alone." Vizsla's eyes hardened, but he listened. Maul gestured to Savage, to the shadows behind them, to the map displayed in blue light on the ground. "We create a crisis," Maul said. "A threat only you can stop." Savage watched the Mandalorians lean in, their interest rising, their suspicion turning to hunger. It was simple, cleaner than anything Maul had done before. Terror, rescue, control. Savage understood the plan, not because Maul explained it, but because he could feel the shape of it in Maul's mind. Black Sun would strike Sundari. The Pikes would target trade routes. Criminals Maul already commanded would spread chaos across the cities. And Death Watch would step in as saviors. They would end the violence, expose Satine's weakness. seize control. No one on Mandalore would know Maul was behind it. Not until it was too late. Vizsla crossed his arms. And what do you get? Maul did not smile. What I am owed. Vizsla hesitated, looked to his warriors, then back. Fine. We try it. Savage sensed the lie immediately. Vizsla didn't trust them, didn't plan to keep his word. Maul sensed it too, but he didn't care. Betrayal was familiar ground. The deal was struck. The plan began. Chaos spread through the cities within hours. Explosions, riots, shattered structures, fear that Mandalore hadn't felt in decades. Savage walked through the streets at night, hidden beneath armor taken from fallen criminals. He saw people running, crying, calling for help. He felt nothing, not because he didn't care, because he had seen this before. Pain was currency. Chaos was fuel. War was the language. Men like Maul spoke fluently. When Death Watch arrived, the people cheered. When they restored order, the people knelt. When they arrested Satine, the people watched in silence. Savage stood near Maul as the Duchess was dragged through the throne room. Her eyes were tired, her voice soft. This world will break under you. Maul looked down at her. It already has. Vizsla seized the throne, stood tall, victorious. His warriors surrounded him, pride swelling, weapons raised. Savage remained beside Maul, because he knew the truth. The throne didn't belong to Vizsla. It never had. Mandalore was broken, weak, ready. Maul had given Vizsla power, only to take something greater in return. Savage watched Vizsla celebrating, a ruler who didn't realize. He just stepped onto someone else's board. It didn't last. Power never does. When it's stolen, instead of earned. Vizsla sat on the throne, but Maul stood behind it, unseen, unchallenged. The people called Vizsla their liberator, their hero, the one who saved Mandalore. But he was just a shadow, cast by someone else's fire. Savage watched from the side, arms crossed, mind quiet. He didn't trust Death Watch. He didn't trust anyone, except Maul. And even that trust was starting to change. Maul had grown colder, more calculated, more distant. He didn't speak of the Force anymore, or of pain, or of revenge. He spoke of influence, of positioning, of expansion. He wanted more than Mandalore, but he needed Mandalore to prove he could take it. Vizsla tried to push him out, held secret meetings, planned betrayals, gathered allies within his ranks. But Maul was already 10 moves ahead. He challenged Vizsla to single combat, in front of the throne, in front of the warriors. Savage didn't move. He already knew how it would end. The duel was brutal. Bone against blade, steel against fire. Vizsla fought well, proud, desperate. But Maul was better. Not cleaner, not nobler, just more willing to win, at any cost. When it ended, Vizsla lay broken on the stone, his axe slipping from twitching fingers, blood pooling beneath the sigil of his clan. Maul took the darksaber, held it high, spoke not as a Sith, but as a ruler. I am Mandalore. Some bowed, some hesitated, but enough obeyed. Savage looked at his brother, saw the hunger in his eyes, not for justice, not for redemption, for dominance. Satine was brought forward, chained, exhausted. Maul didn't gloat, didn't shout. He whispered to her, "Now you understand. Peace is a lie. Control is truth." She said nothing. Obi-Wan came too late. He arrived in disguise, tried to free her, tried to save what he could. But Maul was waiting. Savage stood at his side as Kenobi was dragged before them. The pain in the Jedi's eyes was quiet, heavy, unspoken. Maul fed on it. He killed Satine. Slowly, deliberately, Savage watched the blade sink into her chest, watched her fall. Not because he wanted to, because Maul didn't look away. He held Kenobi in place, made him watch, made him feel. "This is what you took from me," he said. "And now, I return it." Kenobi didn't beg, didn't scream, he just broke. Savage turned away, not because he was weak, because something inside him was beginning to question what they had become. They had conquered Mandalore. They had made the world kneel. But the throne beneath them was built on ash. The people feared them. The warriors obeyed them. But no one followed them. Not truly. Savage sat alone that night, high above the city, watching the smoke drift through the towers. He thought of Dathomir, of the jungle, of the silence, of the child he used to be. Before alchemy, before war, before Maul, he didn't regret what they had done, but he wondered if this was what freedom really looked like. A throne bought with blood, a brother drowning in power, and himself still standing in someone else's shadow. Savage didn't speak it aloud, but the thought never left him. He had followed Maul through war, through fire, through ruin. He had carried him from madness, watched him rebuild himself, helped him forge power from nothing. But now, he wondered, if he was still free. Mandalore had fallen. The Jedi had retreated. The throne room echoed with silence. And yet, Savage felt something tighter than chains. Maul sat alone most nights, staring at star charts, whispering to himself, planning, always planning. He spoke less to Savage now, more to shadows, more to ghosts. The war was over, but Maul had not stopped fighting. Not outside, inside. His mind was a storm, held together by ambition, and ambition was starting to consume him. Savage stood outside the war room, listened to Maul speak with the remaining Death Watch leaders. He wasn't asking for advice. He was giving orders, precise, unyielding, cold. He spoke of new targets, expansion, the outer rim, of syndicates who had not fallen in line, of Jedi who still lived, of Dooku, especially Dooku. Savage heard his name, not with warmth, not with trust, only necessity. "Savage will move with the first wave," Maul said. "He's stronger than most of them combined." Savage stepped away. He had been praised like that before. By Dooku, by Ventress, and now by someone who had once promised to be more. He thought back to the cave on Lotho Minor, to the broken creature he'd lifted in silence, to the brother he'd saved, not because of power, but because of blood. That Maul was gone now. In his place stood a ruler, and Savage couldn't tell if he was proud of him or afraid. The people of Mandalore didn't look at them with hope. They looked with fear. Children hid when they passed. Merchants avoided their eyes. Soldiers saluted, but only because they had to. This wasn't rule. It was occupation. Savage watched as more warriors left the city. Deployments, raids, whispers of rebellion. Maul seemed to sense it too, but he didn't tighten control. He expanded, pushed farther, harder, faster, as if the more he conquered, the less he had to answer for what he was becoming. Savage confronted him once, quietly. "This isn't what we planned." Maul turned slowly. His voice was measured. "It's the only way forward." Savage didn't argue, not because he agreed, because he saw something in Maul's eyes that wasn't there before. Desperation. Control was slipping, and Maul was grasping at everything to hold it together. He placed a hand on Savage's shoulder. "You're not my servant," he said. "You're my brother." Savage wanted to believe him, but the truth was already there. He had served so many masters. He had forgotten how to live without one, and maybe Maul didn't wear the title, didn't speak the commands like the others, but Savage still followed, still obeyed, still knelt, just like before. The only difference was the name of the throne. He walked away that night, not in anger, in silence. Mandalore stood beneath him, lit in orange, breathing smoke. The throne sat above it, empty for the moment, but Savage could still feel its weight pressing down on them both. It started with whispers, whispers that became tension, tension that became fire, and the fire had been burning for longer than anyone wanted to admit. Mandalore did not belong to the Jedi. It did not belong to the Sith. And now, it no longer belonged to its people either. It belonged to fear. Maul sat on the throne, surrounded by warriors who followed out of necessity, not faith. The dark saber rested across his lap, cold, silent, heavy. Savage stood at his side, watching, waiting, not for orders, for signs, signs of fracture, signs of collapse. And they were everywhere. The streets were no longer quiet. The people no longer bowed. And behind every salute was a hand near a weapon. The system was crumbling, and no one could stop it. Maul spoke of strength, of holding firm, of seizing more systems. He believed that expansion would silence rebellion, but Savage saw the truth. They had taken a world, not ruled it. Death Watch was splintering. The syndicates were growing impatient. The common people, they had not chosen this war. Savage felt the weight in the air. It wasn't resistance. It wasn't defiance. It was inevitability. Maul gathered his advisors. He spoke of a larger war, of moving beyond Mandalore, of creating a galaxy ruled by something more ancient than Jedi or Sith. He spoke like a prophet, but his voice was hollow. Savage didn't interrupt, didn't question, but inside he wondered, what was left of the brother he had saved? What was left of the pain that once made Maul human? The answer was buried beneath titles, beneath weapons, beneath a mask he wore too well. Maul felt it too. He stopped sleeping, stopped resting. He walked the halls of Sundari alone, whispering to himself, practicing moves in empty rooms, staring out over a city that hated him. He had won, and it gave him nothing. Savage watched him, felt the shift. This wasn't power, it was obsession. One morning, Maul stood on the balcony. His voice was low. "They're coming." Savage didn't ask who. Maul didn't need to answer. The Jedi, the Republic, the traitors, all of them. The Force itself had turned against them. And Maul welcomed it. He didn't fear the storm. He wanted it. Because victory hadn't healed him. Conquest hadn't saved him. Control hadn't brought him peace. He needed war. It was the only thing that made sense anymore. Savage understood. He felt the same pull. But where Maul saw purpose in the flames, Savage saw a grave. Bo-Katan had disappeared. So had half of Death Watch. Weapons went missing. Tunnels collapsed. Explosions in the lower levels. And every time Savage mentioned it, Maul said the same thing. Let them come. Savage didn't argue, not because he agreed, because it was too late. The people would not kneel forever. The Jedi would not stay silent. And Maul would never stop. Not until everything they had built turned to ash beneath their feet. The throne still stood, but the world beneath it was cracking. Savage sat alone that night. He watched the city lights flicker, watched the patrols move like ghosts, watched the sky darken. He remembered Dathomir, the night he was chosen, the night he was changed. He had thought that pain had a purpose. That power would bring meaning. But now, with a world at their feet, he felt emptier than ever. Maul was ready for the final battle, but Savage had already begun to question whether the war was worth what they had become. And in the silence, he knew the fire wasn't coming. It was already here, and they were standing in the center of it. The masks came off quietly, not with speeches, not with fire, but with choice. Bo-Katan made hers first. She had watched Mandalore die in silence, watched it bend beneath Death Watch, then break beneath Maul. She had followed Vizsla. She had tolerated Maul, but she would not kneel for a Sith, not even one holding the Darksaber. She vanished from the palace, took loyal warriors with her, and disappeared into the city's veins. Savage felt it begin that night. A ripple in the dark, a breath before the blade. Maul knew too. He welcomed it. The throne room was empty now. Guards posted, doors sealed, but the walls were not thick enough to keep rebellion out. Maul paced the stone floor, Darksaber humming low in his hand. "She's baiting me," he said. "She wants me to move first." Savage didn't respond, because Maul already had. Days earlier, Maul had made another choice, a darker one. He had captured Satine Kryze, alive, kept her hidden in the lower levels, bound, unharmed, waiting. Savage hadn't known, not until the moment Maul told him. "She is Kenobi's weakness," he said, "and weakness must be tested." Savage hesitated, not because of Satine, but because of the look in Maul's eyes. There was no strategy in it, no calculation, only need, not for power, for pain. Maul had learned something on Dathomir, something Savage had never understood until now. Pain wasn't just a weapon, it was home. Kenobi came alone, wearing stolen armor, flying a stolen ship, speaking no words as he landed. Savage watched from the shadows. He didn't try to stop him. Part of him wanted the Jedi to succeed, but another part, a deeper part, wanted to see what would happen when two broken men stood face to face again. They met in the throne room, the place where everything had already gone wrong. Satine was brought in first, chained, tired, unbroken. Kenobi froze when he saw her, the calm Jedi mask slipping for just a moment. Maul watched him closely. "You remember what it felt like, don't you?" Kenobi said nothing. Maul stepped closer, helpless, watching, bleeding. Savage stood in the corner, silent, still. He didn't like this. Not the theater, not the cruelty. Maul ignited the Darksaber. Satine looked at Kenobi. No fear, only sorrow. "I always loved you," she whispered. And then she fell. Maul didn't smile, didn't speak. He just watched Kenobi break, the way he had broken so long ago. Savage looked away, not because it hurt, because it didn't. And that scared him more. Kenobi was thrown into a cell. Satine's body left in the dark. Maul returned to the throne, victorious, but there was no celebration, only silence. The people didn't cheer. The warriors didn't raise their weapons. Even Death Watch, those who remained, stood still. They had seen enough. Bo-Katan struck that night, sabotaged hangars, opened prison doors, lit signals across the city. The mask of order shattered. Sundari rose in flame. Savage moved through it like a ghost, crushing rebels, shielding Maul. But his heart wasn't in it, not fully. He killed to survive, not to win, because deep down, he knew the war was already lost. Not in tactics, not in numbers, in purpose. They had come to build something, but what they had built was hollow. A throne surrounded by ashes, a victory sealed in blood, and the one they had tried to destroy, Kenobi, still lived. Savage stood in the burning streets, breathing smoke, watching Maul descend deeper into vengeance. And for the first time, he asked himself the question he never thought he would ask again. What if we're wrong? The halls of the palace felt different now. Not triumphant, not secure, just empty. The echoes seemed louder, the shadows seemed sharper, and every step Savage took felt like walking through a memory that didn't belong to him. Mandalore was burning outside, but inside, Maul waited for Kenobi, not as a rival, not as a Jedi, as the wound he had never stopped bleeding from. They dragged Kenobi through the corridors, armor cracked, hands bound, eyes hollow. Savage walked behind them. He watched the Jedi's pace, slow, determined, quiet. He didn't look beaten. He looked tired, tired of fighting battles that always brought him back to the same loss. They reached the chamber, the same room where Maul had challenged Vizsla, where Satine had fallen, where the throne had been stained with more than victory. Maul waited in the center, hood lowered, darksaber unlit. He didn't rise, didn't greet Kenobi, didn't even look angry. He looked calm, and that calm was more frightening than rage. "Bring him," Maul said. Savage obeyed, not because he wanted to, because the moment had been coming, long before either of them realized it. Kenobi was forced to his knees. Maul circled him slowly, quietly. "This is where it ends," Maul said. Kenobi didn't look up. "It ended years ago," he whispered. "You just never left." The words struck harder than any blade. Savage saw it in Maul's face. A flicker, a shift, not weakness, recognition. The truth was a mirror, and Maul hated mirrors. He ignited the darksaber. Blue and black light filled the chamber. Cold, shaking, hungry. Savage wanted to step forward, not to help Maul, not to protect Kenobi, to stop something that was already spiraling out of control. But he didn't move, because he didn't know which side he was stopping. Maul struck first. Kenobi blocked with shackled hands. Barely. The clash echoed through the hall. Heavy, desperate. Maul pressed harder. Kenobi slipped, recovered, dodged. He fought with nothing, but fought anyway. Savage watched. He didn't see Jedi technique. He didn't see Sith hatred. He saw two broken men, trying to survive their own grief. The fight spilled across the chamber, over steps, around pillars, into the throne's shadow. Maul drove Kenobi back, slammed him against stone, held the blade near his throat. Kenobi didn't beg. "I know why you're doing this," he said. "But killing me won't fill the void." Maul's voice cracked. "It will silence it." He pulled back for the final strike. Savage tensed, not out of loyalty, out of instinct. He could feel the moment, the shift, the decision. Everything was about to break. Bo-Katan struck first. Explosions shook the palace. Doors blew inward. Blast of fire filled the hall. Maul turned instantly. Kenobi dropped to the floor. Savage moved between them without thinking. Not to defend Maul, not to defend Kenobi, to defend himself from a future he no longer understood. Bo-Katan entered with her warriors, masks glowing, weapons raised. "This is the end of your rule," she shouted. Maul snarled. Savage braced. The fighting erupted around them. Blades, jets, smoke. Savage cut through 2 warriors, blocked a third, watched Kenobi slip away in the chaos. He didn't chase him. He didn't know if he should. Maul fought like a man drowning, grabbing anything to stay above the surface. Savage saw it now, the fear beneath the fury. Maul wasn't fighting for power. He was fighting to keep from falling back into the darkness he came from. The darkness Savage had pulled him out of. And in that moment, Savage realized something he had never dared to think. Maybe Maul didn't need a brother anymore. Maybe he needed a servant. And Savage was done being one. The smoke never cleared. It sank into the palace walls, into the armor of the dead, into the silence that followed. Savage stood among the wreckage, not wounded, not victorious, just still. Maul breathed heavily beside him, face streaked with blood, eyes wide with something deeper than fury. Loss, not of the war, of the illusion. Kenobi was gone. Bo-Katan had vanished. The people had turned, and Maul still stood on the throne steps, like it meant something. Savage didn't speak. He had nothing left to say. Maul dropped the darksaber, let it clang against the floor. A long, slow exhale followed. "They all leave," he muttered. His voice was hoarse, quiet. "Every one of them." Savage didn't respond. He wasn't sure who Maul meant. Kenobi, Satine, Sidious, himself, maybe all of them. Maul turned to him. "We still have Mandalore." Savage met his eyes. "No, we have rubble." Maul's jaw clenched. "The Jedi will pay. All of them. Dooku, Sidious, everyone who betrayed me." Savage stepped forward. "They didn't betray you. They just stopped following." Maul narrowed his gaze. "What are you saying?" Savage looked around the throne room. Broken pillars, burning tapestries, empty corridors. "I'm saying this isn't strength." Maul's voice dropped lower. "You question me now." Savage didn't flinch. "I followed you into darkness, fought for you, killed for you." He paused. "And now I ask, what did we build?" Maul stepped down from the throne, one step at a time, slow, measured. "A legacy," he said. Savage shook his head. "No, a lie." Maul stopped. His silence was heavier than a blade. Savage's voice cracked. "I saved you, not to serve you, to stand with you." Maul's expression twisted. "You think you're my equal?" Savage didn't answer, because for the first time, he didn't need to. Maul raised his hand. A flicker of the Force surged forward. Savage blocked it, held his ground. Maul tried again. Harder. Savage caught his wrist. No anger, no hate, only truth. "I'm not afraid of you." Maul's arm trembled in his grip, but he didn't pull away. He looked into Savage's eyes and saw the reflection he feared most. someone who no longer needed him. They stood like that for a moment. Two brothers, two weapons, no longer aiming at the galaxy, now pointing at each other. Savage let go, turned, walked across the broken stones. Each step felt heavier than the last, but lighter, too. He didn't know where he was going, only that it had to be away from this. From the throne, from the fire, from Maul. Behind him, Maul didn't follow, didn't call out, didn't stop him, because deep down, he knew the bond was breaking. And this time, there was no force strong enough to pull it back together. Outside, the city was in ruins, ash in the wind, sirens in the distance. Savage looked up at the stars. They looked the same, unchanged, uninterested. He remembered the jungle of Dathomir, the chanting, the pain, the nights he wished for a name. And now, with one of the most feared names in the galaxy, he felt smaller than ever. He wasn't a Sith, wasn't a Jedi, wasn't a ruler, wasn't a servant. He was just Savage, nothing more, nothing less. And maybe, in the ruins of Mandalore, that was finally enough. Mandalore was behind them, but the weight of it followed. They didn't speak about what happened, not the fire, not Satine, not the fracture that left the throne cold and the people colder. Maul moved on. Savage followed, but something between them had changed. Something quiet and dangerous. The Shadow Collective spread across the outer rim. One system at a time, one crime family at a time. The Pikes, Black Sunday, the Hutts, all fell in line, not because they believed in Maul, because they feared what he might become. Savage stood beside him in every meeting, every battlefield, every dark chamber lit by holograms and threats. He was silent, imposing, unquestioning, but inside, he had started asking questions. Their fleets had grown, so had their reach. Trade lanes were taxed, shipments redirected, whole sectors bent under their shadow. And yet, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. It felt like weight. Maul pushed harder, always moving, always searching for something. But it wasn't just control. It was obsession. A need to never feel small again, to never be powerless, to never be forgotten. Savage understood it. He had felt it too, but Maul had gone deeper. He had buried the pain so far that only conquest could numb it. They met resistance on Obadiah. A Pike faction refused to kneel. Maul sent a message. Savage delivered it. The streets burned. The leaders died. The children watched. Savage didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. But afterward, he couldn't look at his hands. Not because they were bloodied, but because they didn't feel like his anymore. He approached Maul on the ship. They weren't our enemies. Maul didn't turn from the viewport. They were an example. Savage stepped closer. There was another way. Maul's voice was cold. There never is. Silence stretched between them. Not the silence of brothers, the silence of strangers, wearing old memories like armor. Maul walked away without another word, and Savage felt it again. The question he didn't want to answer. What am I to him now? A partner? A shadow? A servant? He remembered Dooku. The missions, the orders, the betrayals. He remembered Ventress, the lies behind her smile, the leash behind her kindness. He had escaped them both, and yet somehow, he was here again, following, bleeding, breaking, for someone who never looked back. Maul announced their next move without discussion. Florum, a Hutt-controlled mining hub. wealthy, well-armed, defiant, perfect for what Maul needed. A show of power. Savage led the first wave, crushed defenses, cleared landing zones, split stone with his bare hands. But as he stood over the burning refineries, he didn't feel pride. He felt smaller, not weaker, but distant, like he was watching himself from somewhere else. The people surrendered quickly. Maul gave no mercy. He ordered executions, mass arrests, public fear. Fear binds faster than hope, he said. Savage said nothing, but the words stayed with him. That night, he sat alone by the landing ramp, watched the flames rise from the valley below, watched the workers cry out for help. No one would give them. He thought about Mandalore, about the way Satine looked at Maul, about the way Maul looked at Kenobi, and he saw something he hadn't seen before. None of this was about building, it was about breaking. And Savage, for all his strength, was still being used. He clenched his fists, felt the power surge through him. But even now, power felt hollow, like muscle without meaning, like a blade without purpose. Maul joined him minutes later, said nothing, stood beside him. Together, they looked down at what they had taken, a planet brought to its knees, a people silenced, a crown made of ash. Maul spoke quietly. "We're only just beginning." Savage didn't reply, because he wasn't sure if that was a promise or a warning. The stars blurred past the viewport. Savage stood alone in the dark. The hum of the ship felt distant, like a memory he hadn't made yet. Each hyperspace jump took them farther from where they started. From Mandalore, from Dathomir, from themselves. They had become a myth. Two brothers, Zabrak warlords, unseen, unstoppable. But myths don't feel pain, and Savage did. On Nal Hutta, they broke a council of crime lords, crushed an uprising before it even began. Maul executed the head speaker on a balcony in front of thousands. The message was clear: obey or vanish. Savage stood beside him, silent, powerful. But the people didn't look at him with fear. They looked at him with sorrow, like they knew he didn't want to be there. They were right. Maul walked with a longer shadow now. He said less, slept less, felt less. Every step was war, every breath a calculation. He didn't fight like a warrior anymore. He fought like a ghost, trying to prove he still existed. Savage watched him from the edges, the man he had carried out of madness, now a king of broken kingdoms. And every day, the silence between them grew. They conquered world after world, each one bleeding more than the last. Sereno, Ord Mantell, the moons of Shalita. No world escaped untouched. No life remained unchanged. Maul left governors behind, pawns, masks, empty voices. But power like that rots quickly. Savage knew it. He had seen it before. A throne built on fear never stands for long. Still, he followed, not because he believed, because he didn't know how to stop. On Arcanis, a Jedi finally stood against them. One night, alone, strong, Savage fought him first. They clashed in a canyon of smoke, blade against blade, roar against silence. It should have been easy, but the Jedi didn't fight to win. He fought to understand. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Savage struck harder. "Is this who you are?" Savage didn't answer, because he didn't know. The Jedi fell, not dead, wounded, left behind. Maul approached, ready to finish it. But Savage stepped between them. "Leave him." Maul stared at him, long, still, then walked away. Savage watched the Jedi crawl to safety. He didn't know why he'd done it. Mercy? No. Instinct. Something old. Something quiet, trying to survive inside him. They returned to their ship. No words, no questions, but the tension hung like a blade, waiting to drop. Maul gathered his council. What remained of it? They spoke of a fleet near Corellia, a Hutt betrayal, a breach in Black Sun control. Maul planned retaliation. Savage stayed silent, but he saw it in their eyes. They feared Maul, but they feared the future more, because Maul had no endgame, no goal beyond the next strike, just movement, just domination, and domination, for its own sake, always eats itself. Savage walked the halls that night, alone. He passed soldiers, servants, eyes that dropped to the floor. They didn't see him as a brother of power. They saw him as an extension of Maul, a fist, a shadow, a tool. He entered the training room, stood before the mirror, studied his reflection. The horns, the eyes, the tattoos. He looked more like Maul every day, but felt less like him than ever. He remembered his name, Savage. It had never been a name, only a title, given, not chosen. He whispered it under his breath, not to remind himself who he was, to ask if he was still there. Maul entered minutes later, unannounced, expression flat. "We strike Corellia next," he said. Savage didn't look at him. And then, Maul narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" Savage turned. "What comes after?" Maul stepped forward. "There is no after, only control." Savage held his gaze. "And if control is all we have, what are we without it?" Maul didn't blink. "We are free." Savage nodded, slowly, but the word felt wrong in his mouth. Because freedom shouldn't feel like a leash, and Maul was beginning to pull too hard. The name Savage had once meant something: strength, survival, vengeance. But now, it echoed hollowly, through halls filled with whispers, and eyes too afraid to meet his. They called him Lord. They called him General. They bowed when he passed. But they didn't see him. Not really. They saw Maul's shadow, his echo, his weapon. Savage sat in the war room, alone. The table glowed with targets, coordinates, names, everyone a new front, everyone a life, about to be erased or consumed. He stared at them, but felt nothing. No hunger, no fire, just silence, a silence he couldn't outrun. Maul entered with the usual quiet fury, a list in hand, a plan already drawn. "We strike Fondor," he said. Savage didn't move. Another show of strength. Maul nodded. "We have to remind them." Savage looked at the map, at the clusters of systems under their grip. And how many reminders, before there's nothing left to remember us by. Maul's stare sharpened. "What are you saying?" Savage stood slowly. "I'm saying this isn't rule. It's rot." Maul stepped forward. "Be careful, brother." Savage didn't flinch. "I am." They said nothing else. But the rift widened. That night, the council met. The Black Sun representatives arrived late, tense, nervous. Maul spoke first. Accusations, demands, warnings. One of the captains, a man named Toran Fane, spoke back, not with anger, but weariness. "This isn't what we agreed to. You don't want allies. You want servants. Maul rose, face blank. Savage felt the chill before it came. The saber ignited. The room turned cold. Tauren didn't move. You can kill me, he said, but it won't change the truth. Maul didn't hesitate. The blade pierced armor, split bone. Tauren fell without a sound. The room froze. Savage looked at the body, not in horror, not in shock, in recognition. This wasn't justice. It wasn't necessary. It was control. And Maul, the Maul he had once saved, was gone. After the meeting, Savage found himself in the old hangar, where they had first landed after Mandalore. The place was dark now, abandoned, like a memory too painful to revisit. He walked between the rusted ships, ran his hand across cold hulls, listened to his breath echo back at him. He remembered carrying Maul here, broken, feral, barely alive. He remembered hope, the hope that saving his brother meant saving himself. But now Maul stood taller than ever, and Savage felt smaller with every step. A voice broke the silence. You don't belong here anymore. Maul, behind him, watching, always watching. Savage turned. Neither do you. Maul stepped closer. His voice was calm, too calm. You doubt me. Savage didn't answer. You think I've lost my way. Savage looked him in the eye. I think you never left it. Maul's expression didn't change, but something behind it cracked. You were made to follow, he said. Don't forget that. Savage stepped forward. No, I was made to serve, but I chose to follow you. The space between them felt like a battlefield. Every word, a blade. I gave you purpose, Maul said. You gave me orders, Savage replied. You gave me blood. Maul's hand twitched near his saber. Savage saw it and didn't move. If you kill me now, he said, what will you be left with? Maul's voice dropped. Silence. Savage nodded. That's all you've ever wanted. Not peace, not power, silence. Maul didn't deny it. And that was the worst part. Savage turned away, not in weakness, in choice. The hangar doors hissed open. Light from the corridor spilled in, soft, faint, but enough. He didn't look back, and Maul didn't stop him, because even a shadow knows when it's been left behind. It began with silence, not the kind that brings peace, the kind that grows between two people until they no longer hear each other. Savage no longer stood at Maul's side. He stood near, but not with him. The difference was small, but it mattered. Every mission since Fondor was colder, sharper, quieter. The bond was fraying. They didn't speak unless they had to. When they fought, it was mechanical, efficient, but soulless. Their rhythm, once unspoken, was now a memory. On Cinder, a rebellion flared. Small, desperate, Maul crushed it with precision. Savage led the charge, but his mind wasn't in the fire. He watched Maul, watched the slaughter, and he saw it again. That hunger, that void. Maul didn't want to win. He wanted to erase everything, everyone, until nothing remained but him. After the battle, Savage stood alone, in the ruins, in the smoke, in the question that had followed him since Dathomir. What am I becoming? He returned to the ship without a word. Maul was waiting in the command room. Another planet marked, another enemy declared. Savage didn't sit. You're not building anything, he said. Maul looked up. You think I care about building? Savage's jaw tightened. I think you only care about breaking. Maul rose, slow, measured. We are not the Jedi. We don't preach peace. We don't preserve weakness. Savage shook his head. No, but we were supposed to rise, not fall into the same pit as those we hate. Maul stepped closer, eyes dark, voice lower. Is that what you think? Savage didn't back down. I don't think anymore. I know. A pause. Then Maul said it. Then leave. The words hit harder than any blade, but they were expected. Savage nodded once, turned, then stopped. You were my brother. I believed in you. Maul didn't respond, didn't move, didn't care. Savage left, not in anger, not in fear, in clarity. He didn't take a ship. He walked into the city, disguised, quiet, just another shadow, in a world of them. He sat by a fire that night, alone, no armor, no command, just a man who had given everything and found nothing waiting. He thought of Farrell, of the brothers he lost, of the boy he used to be. And for the first time in years, he wept, not loudly, not long, just enough to know the pain was still his. Back on the station, Maul stood in the throne room, but it didn't feel like victory. He had the power, the fleets, the fear, but not the one person who never feared him, not the only one who ever saw past the anger. He didn't say Savage's name, but he thought it, over and over, like a curse, like a prayer. The next day, the alarms sounded. Republic scouts. Too close. Maul ordered the fleet to move. He was calm, deadly, but not whole. Because even monsters can feel the absence of something real. Savage kept moving. No destination, no map, just a path away from what he had become, and maybe toward who he might still be. The bond hadn't broken in one moment. It had shattered slowly, softly, under the weight of 1,000 choices, 1,000 silences. And now, the war between them was no longer loud. It was distance. It was memory. It was regret. They would meet again. The galaxy would see to that. But when they did, they would not be brothers. They would be reminders of what they lost, what they gave up, what they destroyed. Together and apart, the fortress on Zanbar was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of silence that grows after too much noise. Savage stood on the balcony, alone. Beneath him, the remnants of the Shadow Collective moved like insects. Silent, busy, unsure. He didn't watch them. He watched the sky. Dark clouds, cold wind, and something else. A weight, a warning. For weeks they had hidden here, regrouping, rebuilding, pretending they had time, pretending no one would come. But Savage knew better. He had known since Mandalore, since Maul's hand crushed a throne, meant for someone else. Nothing built on blood lasts long. Maul entered the hall behind him. His steps were calm, but Savage didn't need to turn. He could feel the storm inside him. It won't hold, Savage said. Maul didn't answer. He stood beside his brother and looked into the clouds. Savage glanced at him. You've felt it too. Maul's jaw tightened. Yes, there was no pretending now. Sidious was coming. Not an army, not a threat. The Dark Lord himself. He wasn't coming to reason. He wasn't coming to reclaim. He was coming to remind. Maul turned away. Double the perimeter. Prepare the fleet. Savage didn't move. You can't fight him. Maul stopped. Then what would you have me do? Savage's voice was low. Run. Maul looked back. I did that once. And you lived, Savage said. Maul stepped closer. But I was hollow. I won't live that way again. Savage said nothing. Because there was nothing to say. Maul would face him. And Savage would not leave his brother. Not now. Not at the end. The fortress buzzed with activity. Soldiers loading weapons. Ships being armed. Orders shouted in every corridor. But it was all noise. None of it would matter. Not when he arrived. At dusk, the skies changed. The clouds didn't shift. The wind didn't howl. But the air turned heavier. And the force twisted. Every warrior on Zanbar felt it. Even those who had never touched it. He was here. Darth Sidious. The phantom behind every shadow. The puppeteer behind every war. And he didn't need to announce himself. His presence was the announcement. The guards at the outer gates fell without sound. Crushed. Folded. Forgotten. No lightsaber. No army. Just power. Raw and endless. Maul stood in the throne room. Waiting. Savage entered beside him. No armor now. No titles. Just two brothers who had climbed too high. Maul didn't look at him. If I fall, he said, don't fight him. Savage shook his head. I didn't come this far to watch. A pause. Then Maul whispered, then we fall together. The doors opened. There was no sound, no warning, just him. Sidious, cloaked, calm, smiling. The smile was the worst part. It wasn't cruel. It was certain. Like he had already won. Like this wasn't a battle, just a punishment. Maul stepped forward. My lord. The words were cut in half. Sidious raised a hand, and the room shattered. The walls groaned. The pillars bent. Savage was thrown across the floor. Maul landed harder. Sidious didn't move. He didn't need to. Savage rose slowly. He didn't feel fear. Not exactly. What he felt was inevitability. This was not a fight they could win. This was a sentence being carried out. Maul ignited his blade. Sidious smiled wider. Two blades lit crimson. Sidious lit none. And then he moved. It was like lightning given form. Savage barely saw it. A flicker, a blur, a wound across Maul's chest. He fell back. Sidious turned to Savage. You were never meant to matter, he said. And then came the storm. Savage fought. He fought harder than he ever had. Every strike was survival. Every parry, desperation. He was strong. But strength wasn't enough. Sidious danced around him. Not just faster, smarter, crueler. Every movement was a lesson. Every blow, a punishment. Maul rejoined the fight. Together, they pushed. For a moment, just a moment. They forced Sidious to retreat a step, but only one. Then came the scream. Force lightning. Not a burst. A wave. It swallowed the chamber, burned the air, tore the ground open. Savage fell. Maul screamed his name, but Savage couldn't hear him. His body shook. His breath stopped. His vision faded. Sidious stepped forward. Calm, cold. He looked down at Savage. You were never the Sith, he said. Just a beast. Savage reached up, tried to speak, tried to remember. Why he had followed. Why he had killed. Why he had hoped. But all he could do was fall back. Eyes open, heart still, and the storm moved on. The storm didn't end with Savage falling. It only changed shape. Sidious stood in the ruins of the chamber, cloaked in a darkness that felt older than the fortress itself. Sparks glowed on the ground. Smoke drifted in slow spirals. But the Dark Lord did not look at the destruction. He looked at Maul, as if everything else was beneath notice. Maul rose, shaking. His breath came rough. His eyes burned with a fury he could barely contain. Sidious smiled. "Do you remember, my apprentice?" he asked softly. "This is how power feels." Maul ignited his saber, hands trembling. "I am not your apprentice." Sidious stepped forward. "No," he said. "You are my failure." The words hit harder than the blows that followed. Maul lunged, faster than Savage ever saw him move. The blades clashed with a crack that shook the courtyard. Red and crimson sparks sprayed across the stone. Maul roared, driving forward with all he had left. But Sidious barely shifted. Every strike Maul threw was answered by a movement so small it felt insulting. A turn of the wrist, a shift of the foot, a tilt of the blade. Sidious wasn't fighting. He was teaching. Teaching Maul just how small he truly was. Savage groaned on the ground. His body didn't respond. Pain pulsed through him, but his eyes stayed open. He saw Maul struggle. He saw Sidious step around him like a patient storm. And he saw the truth Maul refused to accept. This wasn't vengeance. This wasn't control. This was punishment. Maul tried again, using both sabers. Sidious laughed, a low, pleased sound. As if this wasn't a battle, but entertainment. "You learned nothing," Sidious said, parrying 2 strikes at once. "Not from the Jedi. Not from your brother. Not even from me." Maul's teeth clenched. "You left me to die." Sidious sliced across his guard. "You were replaced." Maul stumbled. Sparks lit the ground. Savage tried to stand. His arm shook violently, but he pushed anyway. For Maul. For the bond that had once saved them both. Sidious sensed it. His gaze flicked down, and lightning struck. Savage collapsed again, darkness flashing in his eyes. His flesh burned, his armor cracked. His heart pounded in uneven beats, but he kept breathing. Somehow, Sidious's voice deepened. "I allowed you to grow strong," he said to Maul, "but you grew foolish." Maul's saber locked with his. "You trained me to be a weapon." Sidious's eyes glowed. "And weapons are discarded when broken." With one motion, he tore Maul's blade aside and sent him crashing into a pillar. Stone shattered. Dust filled the air. Maul slid to the ground, dazed. Sidious did not slow. He approached. Measured steps. No rush, no mercy. Maul forced himself up. His legs shook, his vision blurred, but he refused to kneel. He would not kneel again. Sidious extended his hands. The force slammed Maul backward, pinning him against the wall like an insect caught in a web. He gasped as pressure crushed his chest. His bones creaked, his muscles strained. Savage reached out weakly. "Maul." Sidious didn't look at him. "You sought to rule," he said, "but you cannot rule yourself." He tightened his grip. Maul's scream echoed across the broken hall. Savage pushed harder, dragging himself forward inch by inch. His breath rattled. His vision dimmed. But he didn't stop. Sidious flicked a finger. Savage flew backward again, skidding across the floor. He nearly blacked out. Maul sagged against the wall, trembling. "You are nothing," Sidious whispered. Maul's eyes burned with hatred. "I survived you." Sidious smiled. "You survived because I allowed it." With a flash of movement, Sidious closed the distance. His sabers ignited 2 red blades humming like the heartbeat of the dark side itself. Maul ignited his own, He barely had time to block. The sound of their clash was thunder. Sidious rained strikes with impossible speed, each blow designed not to kill but to break. Maul staggered with every step. His guard faltered, his breath hitched. Savage heard every impact, every grunt, every step, every failure. He forced himself up once more. His vision flickered. The world tilted. His hands trembled beyond control. But he would not lie there. He was Savage Opress. He was not done. Maul's saber flew from his hands, knocked away by a crushing strike. It skittered across the stone, landing near Savage's broken arm. Maul fell to his knees, panting. Sidious walked in a slow circle around him. A lost apprentice, he said, hiding behind a broken brother, building an empire of children. He stopped in front of Maul. "You are not a Sith." Maul looked up weakly. "No," he said. "I am something else." Sidious struck him with a force blast that flung him across the room like a doll. Maul rolled, coughing, gasping for breath. Savage crawled toward him. Sidious watched him struggle. "There it is," he said. "Loyalty." Savage's hand shook as he reached for his brother. Sidious lifted his fingers. And now, lightning filled the world. Savage had never felt fear like this. Not on Dathomir. Not during the ritual. Not when he stood before Dooku. Not even in Mandalore. This was different, because now, he was the only one left standing. Maul lay broken on the ground. His saber lost. His breath shallow. His will shattered. And Sidious was still smiling. Not out of joy. Not out of hatred. But because all of this was inevitable. Savage looked up, blood dripping from his mouth. His limbs trembled, torn by lightning and strikes he couldn't block. But he rose. Not tall, not proud, just upright. He grabbed his saber. The weight felt different now, like a lie he'd carried for too long. He didn't light it yet. He stepped between Sidious and Maul. Not to protect, but to choose. "I am not your pawn," he said quietly. Sidious tilted his head. "You were never anything else." Savage tightened his grip. "I made my own path." Sidious raised an eyebrow. "Did you?" The words lingered like poison. Savage ignited his blade. The sound was soft. A final promise. He charged. Sidious didn't even block at first. He let Savage strike, again and again, each swing fueled by everything left in him. Anger, regret, hope, none of it mattered. Sidious flowed like water. His twin blades snapped to life and danced around Savage's strikes. Not defending, humiliating. Savage roared. He drove forward, kicking, striking, slashing with wild power. But Sidious was beyond strength. He bled Savage slowly, one cut at a time. Leg, shoulder, wrist. Each wound a message. You are nothing. You never were. Savage's vision blurred. His arm faltered. But he didn't stop. He wouldn't stop. He wouldn't let Maul die alone. He struck again. A wide arc meant to force Sidious back. Sidious caught the blade with one hand, then drove his saber through Savage's chest. The sound was quiet, a breath, a snap. Savage gasped. His body jerked. His saber fell from limp fingers. Sidious leaned close. "You were strong," he whispered. "But strength is nothing without purpose." He withdrew the blade. Savage staggered. Blood soaked his armor. His eyes flickered. But he did not fall. He turned toward Maul, took one step, then another. Sidious didn't stop him. He didn't need to. Savage collapsed beside his brother. He reached out, touched Maul's hand. Their fingers met. Barely. Maul opened his eyes, saw the wound, saw the blood, saw the end. Savage. Savage tried to speak. His mouth moved. No sound came. Maul gripped his hand. You were my only. Savage smiled. It was small, crooked, real. Then he exhaled and didn't inhale again. Silence. Maul shook, not from fear, from failure. He pulled his brother close. Savage's body was heavy, too heavy. Maul looked up. Sidious was gone. No farewell, no final words, just absence, the way only monsters vanish. Maul sat in the ruins, holding what remained of the only person who never used him. His brother, not his ally, not his pawn, his brother. And now he was gone. The fire in Maul dimmed. His rage quieted. His grief settled deep. He had lost his purpose, then found it again, then watched it die in his arms. Savage Opress had not been a Sith, not a Jedi, not a king, not a rebel. He had been a child, twisted by others, used by the Force, broken by fate. And now, he was just gone. Maul closed his eyes, and the darkness took him, too. The silence after Savage's death was not peaceful. It was hollow. Maul didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't scream. He just sat there, still, broken. The body in his arms grew cold. He could feel it, minute by minute. There was no one left to fight, no more enemies to strike, no more battles to win, only the echo of what he had lost. Maul had chased power his whole life, first for his master, then for himself. But now he saw it clearly. Power had never been the goal. It had always been escape, from Sidious, from weakness, from fear. And now, he couldn't run anymore. He looked down at Savage's face. The rage that had shaped it was gone. All that remained was peace and silence, the kind Maul had never known. He closed his brother's eyes. Zanbar's sky began to shift. Ash from the battle drifted like snow. The fortress was no longer theirs. It was a grave. Maul stood slowly. His legs trembled, but he forced himself upright. Not as a warrior, not as a lord, just as a brother, carrying the last weight that mattered. He lifted Savage's body in his arms. The soldiers who had survived dared not speak. They watched him pass, silent and still. None followed. None asked where he was going. They knew. He walked through the ruins, through fire, through shattered stone, through blood, until he reached the ridge. Below, the black sands of Zanbar stretched wide, a world of shadows and stone. Maul dug with his hands. No tools, no machines, just flesh and grief. Each handful of sand was a memory, a lie, a truth. He remembered Savage laughing once, long ago, before the alchemy, before the madness. Just a boy with strength in his voice and hope in his eyes. Maul had stolen that from him. Or maybe he had simply delivered him to the fate that waited for them both. The grave was shallow. Maul laid him down gently, like a child. He stared for a long time. Then, without a word, he covered him. Sand over armor, stone over skin, until there was nothing left to see. Just silence and memory. When it was done, Maul sat beside the grave. The sky turned darker, the wind colder, but he didn't move. He had no empire now, no allies, no future. Sidious had spared his life, but he had taken everything else. Maul understood that now. It wasn't mercy. It was cruelty to leave him alone, unkilled, unwanted. He whispered to the wind, "He was better than me." No one answered. The force was quiet. He stood and turned away. The Shadow Collective fell in the days that followed, scattered, leaderless, afraid. Maul let them go. He didn't care. He returned to Mandalore once, but Bo-Katan had taken it back, rightfully. He said nothing. He just watched from the shadows and walked away. He never returned to Dathomir. There was nothing left there. Not of the Nightsisters, not of his past. Mother Talzin was gone. Ventress was gone. Even the darkness felt quieter. He went to worlds no one remembered. Tombs, ruins, caves carved in forgotten stone. He wasn't searching for power anymore. He was searching for something else. For meaning, for memory, for silence. In time, he found it. On Malachor, an ancient battleground, blackened by the Force, quieted by time. There, he waited. Not to rise, but to fade. The galaxy changed. The Jedi fell. The Sith rose. New wars were fought. New names burned across the stars. But Maul did not care. He had played his part. He had lost his brother, and there was no healing that. Years passed. No one remembered Savage Opress, but Maul did. Every day, he remembered the way Savage had looked at him in death. No blame, no hatred, just quiet, like he had finally found the peace Maul had never known. And perhaps that was enough. The wind over Dathomir was no longer alive. It whispered, yes, but the voices were gone. The Nightsisters did not sing here anymore. The rivers no longer ran red with magic. And the fortress, once a palace of fear and ritual, was now nothing more than bones. Maul stood at the edge of it all, not as a conqueror, not as a Sith, just as what was left. He had buried Savage on Zanbar, but something had drawn him back here. Not power, not revenge, only silence. The wind moved through the ruins like memory. Maul listened, not with his ears, with the ache behind his breath, with the part of him that still remembered what it meant to belong. He stepped through the broken gates, charred stone, shattered altars, cracked murals, blackened with blaster fire and time. This had been Savage's birthplace, not of blood, but of becoming. It was here the spell had been cast, where his body had been twisted, where his soul had been buried. Maul traced the steps in his mind. He saw them standing here, Ventress, Talzin, the circle of witches, and Savage kneeling, not afraid, just empty, chosen, shaped, unasked. Maul had not been there that day, but he felt it all the same. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the dust smelled of fire again, of incense, of war. The knights he had once mocked for their mystery now swallowed him whole. He walked deeper into the temple. No lightsaber lit his path, only memory and regret. There, in the center of the chamber, lay the shattered cauldron. He knelt beside it, touched the stone. It was cold, lifeless. The green flames would never return. He didn't need them. The ghosts were already here. In the Force, he felt the traces. Savage had screamed here, not from pain, but from confusion. The Force had ripped him apart, not to enlighten, but to weaponize. And still, he had served. Loyal, even in madness, even when he began to question. Maul felt his throat tighten. He hated the silence, but he feared the sound, because if he opened his mouth now, he would speak the name. And if he spoke the name, he would fall apart. Instead, he sat right there on the cold stone floor, where once Savage had been remade. He whispered, "I'm sorry." No one answered. The walls didn't echo. Even the Force seemed too tired to respond. But he knew it was heard, because Maul had learned something Sidious never taught him, something Talzin never dared admit. Power can raise armies, it can shatter planets, but it cannot undo a single moment of regret. Savage had died for nothing. No prophecy, no triumph, just punishment for the crime of existing. Maul ran a hand over his face. His fingers trembled. He remembered the boy his brother had been. Strong, curious, silent, but not yet angry. And he remembered what the galaxy had done to him. It had taught him that love was weakness, that mercy was failure, that survival meant obedience. Maul had believed it too, until it killed the only soul who had ever stood beside him. Without asking why, he stood again. The chamber seemed smaller now, not because it had collapsed, but because Maul had grown, not in strength, but in pain. He turned away from the cauldron, from the bones, from the ash, and walked out into the night. Outside, the wind was softer. It brushed past him, like a memory he couldn't hold. He looked up at the sky. No ships, no war, just stars, distant, indifferent, unknowing, and yet one of them had watched. When Savage was born, when Savage was broken, when Savage died, Maul wondered if that star still remembered, if it whispered the name. In the quiet between light, he whispered it now. Savage. There was no reply. But that was all right. Some names weren't meant to be spoken loudly. Some names were meant to live only in silence, only in pain, only in love. He walked away from the ruins, not to build, not to fight, just to carry. Because what he carried now was not a weapon, not a vendetta, not even a future. It was a memory. And some memories, no matter how small, are heavier than empires. He kept walking, planet to planet, war to war, always moving, but never leaving. Savage was dead, but he was not gone. Maul felt him in everything. The silence between battles, the moments before sleep, the cold echo in the Force that never answered back. There had been no time to mourn, no funeral, no rites, no rest. Zanbar had burned, the Shadow Collective had splintered, and Darth Sidious had taken everything. But Maul had survived, not because he was stronger, because pain kept him alive. Savage had screamed when he died, not in fear, but in confusion. Even in his final moment, he had not understood why the galaxy wanted him gone. Maul had seen it, he had felt it, and he carried that scream with him everywhere. He rebuilt his army, reforged his identity, but something was missing. A shadow behind his thoughts, a name he could no longer speak without feeling less than whole. Savage. He had been more than a weapon, more than a servant. He had been Maul's only mirror. In him, Maul saw the child he once was, unchosen, unloved, angry without knowing why. They had not been raised for peace, only usefulness. Savage had resisted, then obeyed, then questioned again. But in the end, he had stood by Maul. Even when the cost was death, Maul remembered that last look, the way his brother's hand reached for him, not to strike, but to stay. A silent plea, don't go without me. But Maul had to let go. There was no saving him. Not then, not anymore. Now, he wandered, not because he had a plan, but because stopping meant remembering, and remembering meant breaking. On Florum, he watched pirates kill each other over crates of credits they didn't need. On Ord Mantell, he saw mercenaries burn villages just to make a point. And on every world, Maul asked himself, would Savage have done this? And every time, the answer was no. Savage had been a killer, but not cruel. He had fought because he had to, because everyone told him that strength was survival. But Maul had started to see the cracks, the doubt, the tiredness, the quiet questions. Savage never spoke aloud. Why are we still running? Why are we always killing? What does it mean to win if we're always alone? Maul had no answer. Then, or now, the galaxy had moved on. The Jedi hunted Sidious. The Sith buried their secrets. The Mandalorians turned inward. No one remembered the Zabrak, who had stood against it all. But Maul did. Every time he ignited his blade, he felt the absence. Every time he claimed another system, he looked beside him, expecting to see yellow eyes, a hulking figure, a brother in silence. But there was only shadow, only the sound of breath he could no longer share. He visited the place again. Once, Zanbar, what was left of it? The grave had no stone, no marking, just scorched soil and scorched memory. He didn't stay long, just enough to whisper, I should have died with you. The wind didn't answer, but the pain deepened. Maul didn't know what Savage believed. At the end, in the dark, as Sidious carved the life from him, did he still trust? Did he still hope? Or had he seen the truth? That Maul had failed him, not in battle, not in strength, but in purpose. Savage had followed, but Maul had never led. He had dragged them from fight to fight, never asking if Savage wanted more. And now, it was too late to ask. That was the burden, not the memory, not the grief, the unspoken truth. Maul had used him, not with cruelty, but with blindness. He had needed a brother, so he forged one, but he never stopped to ask what that brother needed. Now, it was too late, and yet, the Force did not forget. In dreams, Savage came to him, silent, not angry, just present, a weight Maul no longer feared, because in that weight, there was still connection, still the echo of something, almost like love. Maul didn't know if he believed in peace, or destiny, or redemption, but he believed in Savage, and that belief, that memory, was the only thing keeping him whole. The galaxy forgot him, not because he failed, but because he was never meant to be remembered. Savage Opress was made for someone else's story, chosen by witches, changed by Sith, thrown into a war he didn't ask for. He had no legacy, no holocrons, no students, no statues carved in stone, only a name, and even that was not his. It was given. Like a chain, Maul thought about that name often. Opress. It wasn't a title. It was a sentence. He had lived in the shadow of others, never free, never whole. He fought because he was told to. He killed because it was expected. He obeyed because not obeying meant pain. But deep inside, there was something else. A flicker, a whisper. Maul had seen it, in the way Savage hesitated, when innocence screamed, in the way his hands shook after too much death, in the way he looked at Maul, Not with fear, but with hope. Hope for something better. Hope that this bond between them meant more than another tool. Maul had never told him the truth, that he was proud, that he saw strength not just in Savage's fists, but in his silence, that he admired his brother for still believing in something deeper, even after the witches died, even after Dooku broke him, even after Maul took everything. Savage still followed, still stood beside him, and now there was no one left to speak his name. Maul whispered it into the void, into the stars, into ruined temples and forgotten battlefields, not to call him back, but to remind himself that he had existed. Because if no one remembered, then the Force had wasted him, and Maul couldn't accept that. Savage had mattered, not because of what he destroyed, but because of what he tried to become. He had tried to be more than his name, more than a monster, more than a pawn, and even if he failed, he tried. In the end, that is all anyone can do. Try. There was no grave, no ashes, no shrine, just memory. Maul stood alone on Malachor, the ancient Sith world, dead and silent. A battlefield frozen in time. He did not speak. There was no one left to hear him, no brother to answer, no master to command. He had outlived everything. The Jedi were fading. The Sith were devouring themselves. The galaxy had turned the page. But Savage lingered, not in the Force, not in vision, but in Maul's soul, a wound that would never close. In the stillness of the temple, he remembered the laugh they shared after their first victory, the moment Savage caught his breath and almost smiled, the weight of his hand on Maul's shoulder after everything else had burned. Maul never said thank you, never said goodbye. There was no time, only war, only revenge. But here, in the ruins, he whispered it. Thank you. It was too late, but it was real. He closed his eyes, saw Savage's face again, not twisted by rage, not masked in pain, just the boy he might have been. Before the chains, before the spells, before the name, a brother. That's all he ever wanted to be. Maul breathed deeply. He was tired, older than his years, broken in ways no healer could touch. And as he stood beneath the shattered statues of Sith, long forgotten, he saw himself clearly. A shadow, a relic, a man who lost everything, except one name, Savage. He said it aloud, once, softly, then again and again, until the word became a prayer, not for resurrection, not for power, just for peace. If anyone ever asked what he fought for, Maul would not say Mandalore, or vengeance, or glory. He would say, I fought for my brother, and in that final memory, he was not alone.